Hello beautiful people. Welcome to Supreme Harry. In today's episode, we explore Harry collapsed at platform 9 3/4 and woke up knowing he was Lord of 17 ancient houses and King of Magic. Hit like, subscribe, and join our community of story lovers. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The weight of empty platforms. The summer had done its work on Harry Potter the way long summers in small, airless rooms tend to do, quietly, thoroughly, and without leaving marks that anyone bothered to look for. He stood at King's Cross with his trunk and his owl and the particular kind of exhaustion that lives behind the sternum rather than in the muscles, the kind that sleep doesn't touch. Hedwig shifted in her cage, ruffling her feathers against the September heat, and Harry watched the barrier between platforms 9 and 10 the way you watch a door you're not sure you want to open. The Dursleys had dropped him at the curb without getting out of the car. Vernon had said something about the boot in Harry's trunk and Harry had lifted the trunk himself, because asking for help had stopped being something he did sometime around mid-July, when he'd realized that the grief sitting on his chest wasn't going to shift whether he talked about it or not. Sirius had been dead for 11 weeks. Harry picked up Hedwig's cage and walked toward the barrier. The platform was already busy, the organized chaos of September 1st, families clustering in tight groups, owls and cats and one improbable toad, trunks stacked on trolleys, the Hogwarts Express breathing steam at the far end of the platform like something alive and impatient. Harry moved through it the way he moved through most things now, present but slightly outside of it, watching himself navigate the crowd from a small distance. He spotted the Weasleys near the train, the red hair impossible to miss. Ginny waved. Ron was arguing with George about something involving a Zonko's bag. Mrs. Weasley was doing the thing she always did, straightening Arthur's collar and pretending she wasn't checking him over for signs of danger. It was, objectively, a warm and normal scene, and Harry felt it like something pressing against glass. He'd been at the Burrow for the last 2 weeks of August. It had been fine. Everyone had been careful with him, which was almost worse than if they hadn't been. He waved back at Ginny and started toward them, and that was when it happened. No warning. No build-up. One step and then the ground simply ceased to exist beneath him, and Harry Potter went down like a marionette with cut strings, not falling forward or backward, just down, the trolley clattering away, Hedwig's cage ringing against the stone, and then the platform floor coming up to meet him with a sound that cut straight through the crowd noise. He heard shouting. Mrs. Weasley's voice, high and immediate. Running footsteps. And then the noise folded inward like paper and there was nothing. What came next wasn't darkness. Harry had experienced darkness, the darkness of the cupboard under the stairs, the darkness of a Dementor's cold, the flat lightless dark of unconsciousness after Voldemort's curse in the graveyard. This wasn't any of those. This was something older. Something that had a texture to it, like the air before lightning, like the moment between a question and its answer. He was standing, or something like standing, in a space that existed the way a held breath exists. There was light, but not from any source. There was ground beneath his feet, but it wasn't stone or earth. It was simply there, holding him. And arranged before him, like attendants who had been waiting a very long time, were 17 doors. They weren't identical. That was the first thing Harry noticed, the way you notice, in a dream, that the wrong details are sharp. Each door was different. One was iron-banded oak, black with age, marked with a rune he didn't consciously know but recognized the way you recognize a word in your mother tongue. One was silver, almost liquid, engraved with constellations that didn't match any sky he'd studied. One was simply a doorway carved into what appeared to be living stone, older than the others, older than the space around it, and from it came a warmth that pressed against his sternum like a palm. He didn't feel afraid. That was the second thing Harry noticed, and it surprised him enough that he checked, the way you run your tongue along a tooth that's been aching, looking for the pain. It wasn't there. What was there, instead, was something he hadn't felt in a very long time. He felt recognized. You took your time. Harry turned. The voice had come from everywhere and nowhere, which should have been unsettling and wasn't. Standing, or occupying the space where standing would logically occur, was a figure that kept shifting. Young, then old. A woman with silver-streaked hair, then a man with a warrior's build and a scholar's eyes, then something between genders and ages that the word figure barely contained. And through all of it, a constant, eyes the same shade of green as Harry's own. "I've been busy," Harry said, because it seemed like the honest answer. Something like amusement moved through the shifting face. "We know what you've been carrying. We've watched you carry it. Who are you?" "We are 17 answers to a question magic asked a very long time ago." The figure moved, drifted, closer, and Harry held his ground without thinking about it. When the world was younger and magic was less managed, there were houses. Not families in the modern sense, not names and bloodlines and politics. Houses. Seats of magical principle. Each one the custodian of something magic itself needed kept. Harry looked at the 17 doors. And they've been empty. For generations. The last king of magic died without completing the transfer. The houses fell dormant. The knowledge scattered. And magic, the figure paused, and in that pause Harry felt something immense and grieving press against the edges of the space. Magic has been diminishing. Slowly. The way a fire diminishes when no one tends it. And I'm supposed to tend it. You are its tending. You always were. The figure reached out, and where their hand touched Harry's chest, something cracked open, not painfully, not violently, but with the specific relief of a window thrown open in a room that's been sealed too long. "This is not a gift we are giving you. It is a recognition. The 17 houses chose their king before you were born. It merely took you this long to arrive at the moment when you could bear what you are." Harry felt it happening, not like power pouring in, not like a transformation. More like remembering. Like every moment in his life when magic had moved through him with a precision and an instinct that no one had ever fully explained, the accidental magic of childhood, yes, but also the things that had happened in the moments of absolute clarity, when he wasn't thinking about technique or wand movement, when he was simply present and certain. The Patronus at 13. The way he'd pulled the Triwizard Cup from Voldemort's graveyard. The way Priori Incantatem had obeyed something deeper than spell mechanics. It hadn't been luck. It hadn't been love, though love was part of it. It had been this bedrock thing, this deep and ancient recognition between Harry and magic itself. 17 houses, he said. 17 principles. 17 legacies. 17 sets of knowledge, authority, and responsibility. The figure began to step back, the shifting face settling, briefly, into something that looked like his mother's. "You will wake soon. Things will move quickly after that. The world has been waiting, even the parts that don't know they've been waiting." "Voldemort," Harry said. "He's connected to this. What he's doing is a desecration, yes. He has found a ritual. If he completes it, the tether between the ancient houses and living magic will be severed. Magic will not die, but it will become something smaller. Something that can be owned." The figure was almost gone now, the space beginning to brighten toward something ordinary. "He has been working toward this for decades. He does not know that the claiming has occurred. When he learns, he'll come for me. He will come for what you represent. He always has." Almost a whisper now, the 17 doors behind Harry blazing with warm light. "The difference is that now you know what that is." The warmth from the oldest door, the stone one, hit him like a wave, like the first breath of cold air after a long time underground, and "Harry Potter. Harry, can you hear me, dear? I need you to open your eyes." The ceiling of the Hogwarts Express platform glided into focus above him. Madame Pomfrey's face appeared in his vision. She must have been called ahead or arrived with the Hogwarts staff who chaperoned the platform, and her expression was doing a very specific thing that Madame Pomfrey's expression didn't often do. It was frightened. "I'm fine," Harry said. His voice came out remarkably steady. "You are absolutely not fine, you collapsed in the middle of a public, I'm fine, he said again, and sat up. That was when he became aware of several things simultaneously. 1. The platform had gone very quiet around him, the crowd having formed a wide and watchful ring. 2. Ron and Hermione were both crouched at his sides, Ron's face white under his freckles and Hermione holding his wrist in both hands like she was counting his pulse. 3. Every lamp on platform 9 3/4 had brightened by approximately double, the light warmer and steadier than electric light had any business being, and the Hogwarts Express was putting out steam in directions that had nothing to do with its engine. And 4. The magic in the air had changed. He could feel it, all of it, the ambient hum of the enchanted ceiling, the latent charm work on the barrier, the traces of 100 different wand workings that had occurred here over decades. He could feel them the way a conductor hears individual instruments in an orchestra. Not overwhelming. Just present, and detailed, and his in a way that magic had never quite been before. He got to his feet. Pomfrey made a sound of protest and reached for him, and Harry turned to look at her with an expression that wasn't unkind and wasn't asking for permission, and she stopped. "I didn't have a seizure," he said. "I'm not injured. I'll come to the hospital wing when we arrive at Hogwarts and let you examine me properly, but right now I'd like to board the train." Pomfrey stared at him. She'd been treating Harry Potter for 5 years and in that time had seen him come through everything from troll clubs to basilisk fangs to Cruciatus Curse aftershocks, and in all of those instances he had never once looked at her like this, like a man who knew exactly what had just happened to him and had already decided what came next. "1 hour," she said. "You come to me within 1 hour of arrival." "Done." He turned to Hermione and Ron. Hermione's eyes were moving over him the way they moved over a text she was trying to categorize, fast, precise, landing on details. She'd noticed the lights. Of course she had. She was already not saying what she was thinking, which meant she was storing it for a private conversation. Ron looked like he wanted to say half a dozen things and was sorting them by importance. What came out was, "You went down like a sack of rocks, mate. Scared the bloody life out of me." "Sorry," Harry said, and meant it. "I'll explain on the train." He picked up Hedwig's cage. She was unruffled, watching him with those amber eyes that always made him feel like she understood considerably more than an owl should, and they walked to the train. The compartment filled quickly with the people who mattered, Hermione and Ron first, then Neville, breathless from running with a plant cutting he'd been afraid to put in his trunk, and Luna, who arrived last, looked at Harry once with her protuberant silver-gray eyes, and said, "Oh, good." It finally happened, before sitting down and opening the Quibbler upside down. Neville looked between Luna and Harry. What finally happened? Harry looked at his hands for a moment, not from uncertainty, but from deciding where to start. Through the window, London was unspooling into suburbs, and the afternoon light lay across his palms in bars. "Something happened when I collapsed," he said. "Something that I'm going to need all of you to understand, and I'm going to need you to hold your questions until I've gotten through the main parts, because there's a lot and I'm still sorting the edges of it myself." Ron opened his mouth. Hermione put a hand on his arm. He closed it. "I don't know how to explain this in a way that doesn't sound," Harry stopped. He didn't reach for a qualifier. That was new. The old Harry, the one who'd spent 6 years apologizing for existing in inconvenient ways, would have said mad or wrong or like I've gone off the deep end. This Harry looked at the people in front of him and said, "I am the lord of 17 ancient magical houses. I am, by the authority of magic itself, what they used to call the king of magic. I have been since before I was born. I just didn't know it until today." Silence. Luna turned a page. Ron said, "Right." "Ron," Hermione began. "No, I mean," Ron dragged both hands through his hair. "I mean I'm sitting here thinking, you know what, Harry's had Stranger Tuesdays, haven't we? What does it actually mean? Lord of 17 houses." "It means," Hermione said slowly, her voice doing the thing it did when she was assembling something while speaking, "that he holds the legal, political, and magical authority of 17 separate ancient families. Which means, Harry, do you know which ones? Not all of them by name yet. But I know the oldest one. Harry felt the warmth in his chest, steady and unmistakable, like a coal that never quite goes cold. House of Peverell. The name landed in a compartment with the specific weight of names that carry history. Neville's head came up sharply. Even Ron, who knew considerably less ancient magical genealogy than Hermione, went slightly still. The Peverells, Hermione breathed. Harry, that's, the Deathly Hallows, the invisibility cloak your father left you, was always mine, Harry said. It was always coming back to me. The cloak, the stone, they're not just artifacts. They're 2 of 3 seats of authority within the House of Peverell. Magical objects that are also, I don't have the right word, anchors. Places where the house's principle is concentrated. What about the wand? Neville asked. Harry looked at him. Neville's expression was careful, precise, not the round-faced nervous boy who dropped his toad at every first opportunity, but the boy who'd stood in the Ministry and fought Death Eaters without breaking. The Elder Wand, Harry said. I know where it is. He didn't say more. The train moved through a tunnel and the compartment went briefly dark, and in the dark Harry could feel the 17 distinct signatures of the houses he now carried, not as a weight, which was the word he'd expected, but as a kind of chorus. 17 different notes, all harmonizing, all producing something that was none of them individually and all of them together. Luna lowered the quibbler. In the tunnel's dark, her eyes caught light from somewhere. The Raxperts have been very thick around you for years, she said conversationally. I always thought it was because you were confused. But it was actually because you were incomplete. They're gone now. She tilted her head. You look much better. Thanks, Luna. The Nargles are still a problem generally. Noted. When the train emerged from the tunnel, the daylight hit Harry's face, and something passed across Hermione's expression, the look she got when she was watching something important happen and was trying to memorize it accurately. What are you feeling? She asked quietly. She wasn't asking about the magic. Harry thought about it honestly. Like I've been walking around half-assembled for 17 years, he said. And someone just handed me the rest of my parts. Ron looked at the ceiling for a moment in the way he did when he was processing something large. Then he said, okay. So. King of Magic. 17 houses. The Peverells. He looked at Harry. Does Dumbledore know? He'll know soon enough. And does you know who? Not yet. Harry's voice was easy, level. The train window showed green countryside rolling past, sheep on distant hills, England being completely indifferent to everything happening in this compartment. He will. And when he does? Ron pressed. Harry looked out the window. The sun was starting to descend, painting the tops of the hills amber, and in the glass he could see his own reflection, messy hair, round glasses, a scar that had never quite stopped being a mark of everything that had been done to him rather than by him. He studied it for a moment, and then he looked through it, past his own face, to the country beyond. Then he'll understand what he's been fighting, Harry said. For the first time. Madame Pomfrey met him at the castle entrance with the energy of someone who had been waiting with great professional patience and had used all of it up. Hospital wing, she said. Now. Harry went, which surprised her. He sat on the examination bed without being asked, and he held out his arms when she reached for her diagnostic wand, and he answered her questions, how many fingers, what day is it, any nausea, any pain, with calm precision. And while she worked, he watched the instruments she was using and felt their mild charm work brushing against his awareness, and understood their mechanisms in a way that he hadn't 24 hours ago and would have needed 3 charms textbooks to decode before today. The diagnostic results made Madame Pomfrey go very still. She read them. Then she read them again. Then she set down her wand with the careful deliberateness of someone suppressing a strong reaction. Mr. Potter, she said. These readings are different from usual, he said. That is a significant understatement. She looked at him over her reading glasses. Your magical core is registering at a level that my instruments weren't designed to measure. The upper end of the scale simply says, she turned the parchment so he could see it, overflow. The word overflow was written in the tidy, standardized hand of a diagnostic charm, and below it, in smaller text, a notation in Latin that Harry translated without effort, beyond the bounds of this instrument's capacity to measure. See Master Level Assessment Protocol. Am I dangerous? He asked. Not to others, she said, after only a brief hesitation. The readings don't indicate instability. It's more like, she searched for the word, you're a vessel that's been significantly expanded. From the outside it looks the same, but the capacity is, she stopped. I'm going to need to contact the headmaster. I'll contact him myself, Harry said. Tonight. He hopped down from the examination table. Thank you, Madame Pomfrey. You've been very thorough, as always. She watched him walk out and then looked back at the parchment with the word overflow on it, and then she sat down in the chair behind her desk and looked at the wall for quite some time. Dumbledore was in his office, which Harry had known before he reached the 7th floor. Not because of any tracking spell or magical intuition, he'd simply thought about where Dumbledore would be at 9 o'clock on the first night of term, and the answer had presented itself with the clarity of the obvious. He knocked. Come in, Harry. The office was the same as always, the soft whirring of instruments, the portraits of former headmasters pretending to be asleep, Fawkes on his perch with his head tucked under one wing. And Dumbledore himself, behind the desk, fingers steepled, blue eyes doing the careful watchful thing they always did. Harry sat without being invited. That was new. He didn't do it to make a point. He sat because he was tired from the journey and the chair was there and he was no longer in the habit of standing in front of this desk like a student called to account. Something moved through Dumbledore's eyes, precise as a shutter opening and closing. I've spoken with Poppy, the headmaster said. She tells me the diagnostic readings were extraordinary. The word she used was overflow, Harry said. Her instrument couldn't measure it. Yes. Dumbledore turned a small silver instrument on his desk, one of the whirring, spinning kind that Harry had always assumed were monitoring him, and Harry felt its attention, the light brush of its enchantment, and recognized it with complete clarity. It was a soul-depth monitor. It had been reading his magical core for years. And it had just told Dumbledore something that made the old man set it down very carefully. The claiming has occurred, Dumbledore said quietly. Harry looked at him. Not with anger, that would come later, maybe, in different forms, but with the specific sharpened attention of someone who has just confirmed a suspicion. You knew this was possible. I knew, Dumbledore paused, and in that pause Harry read everything he needed to read. The slight tension around the eyes. The deliberate steadiness of the voice. This was a man choosing his words with the precision of someone navigating an argument he'd prepared for. I knew of the ancient houses, yes. I knew of the concept of a king of magic, it is documented in sources very few people have access to. I knew that certain aspects of your magical signature suggested you were a candidate for, and you didn't tell me. Harry's voice was even. Not accusatory. Just precise. For 6 years, you've known this was possible, and you said nothing. Harry, I need to know why. He held up a hand, and the gesture came naturally, the gesture of someone who is certain they'll get to speak again and isn't trying to win a point. Not to be angry about it. I need to understand your reasoning, because you and I are going to need to work together or work against each other this year, and I'd rather it be together. Dumbledore looked at him for a long moment. Behind him, Fawkes lifted his head, regarded Harry with one bright eye, and made a sound that wasn't quite a trill, lower, more meditative, the sound of something being acknowledged. I was afraid, Dumbledore said finally, that the knowledge would accelerate things. That if you knew what you were, the weight of it would break you before you were ready to carry it. Harry absorbed this. He could see the logic. He could see, clearly, that it was the logic of a man who loved him and had made the calculation that love makes, the calculation that says I know better than he does what he can handle. And he could see, equally clearly, how deeply wrong it was. You decided for me, Harry said. Yes. You decided that I wasn't strong enough to know what I was. Dumbledore's chin dipped, barely perceptibly. Harry nodded slowly. Not accepting it. Just marking it. Then here's what changes. You don't make decisions about me without my knowledge anymore. Not about the Horcruxes, not about Voldemort's plans, not about what I can or can't handle. We talk. As equals. He paused. I am Lord of 17 houses, Professor. Some of them predate this school. In the structure of magical authority, I am not your student right now. I'm choosing to be in your school and to work with you because I think you are fundamentally good and because I need your experience and your resources. But I need you to understand what that choice is. Silence. The instrument's word. Dumbledore said, You have not asked whether I agree to these terms. No, Harry said. I haven't. Another silence, different from the first. And then something happened that Harry hadn't expected, a change in the old man's face, a settling, like ground that's been uncertain finding its footing. Not defeat. Something more complicated than that. Something that was, if Harry was reading it correctly, close to relief. I owe you an apology, Dumbledore said. Several, in fact. Some of which relate to matters we have not yet discussed. There'll be time for those. Harry stood. Tonight I need the access codes for the Hogwarts Library's restricted section, the actual restricted section, the one behind the restricted section that students aren't told about, and I need the Goblin Liaison's contact information for Gringotts. Dumbledore blinked. How do you know there is a second restricted section? Harry looked at him. Because there are 17 houses worth of institutional memory in my head right now, he said, not unkindly, and one of them built this library. He left without being dismissed. The portrait behind Dumbledore's desk, a sharp-featured woman who had been headmistress 3 centuries ago, opened one eye and looked at the door Harry had gone through. Then she looked at Dumbledore. Well, she said. There it is, then. Yes, Dumbledore said softly. There it is. Hermione was waiting in the corridor outside Gryffindor Tower, sitting on the floor with a book open across her knees, which was how Harry found her, the portrait of the fat lady regarding her with mild suspicion, the book clearly borrowed from the restricted section via means Harry had learned not to ask about too directly. How'd it go? Hermione asked, not looking up. He knew. Harry leaned against the wall beside her. Not all of it. But he knew enough. Hermione was quiet for a moment. Are you angry? I should be. That's not what I asked. Harry thought about it. The corridor was empty and the torches were low, and the castle felt different tonight, not dramatically different, not transformed, but attentive, in the way that a house feels when someone who belongs in it comes home. I'm clear, he said finally. Whatever I was carrying all summer, the grief and the fog. It's not gone, but it's not running the room anymore. I can see past it. Hermione closed her book. She looked at him in the way she'd been perfecting since they were 11, the look that meant she was deciding how much of what she was thinking to say. She said all of it. I've been reading about the King of Magic since you told us on the train. There's almost nothing in standard texts, but the references that do exist describe a level of magical authority that isn't just about power. It's about recognition. The magical world has a structure, Harry, an old one that's been buried under the Ministry and Hogwarts governance and blood politics, and what you are is the keystone of that structure. When that structure functions, magic is balanced. When it doesn't, it diminishes, Harry said. Yes. She looked at him carefully. Voldemort's ritual. The one that would sever the connection, if he completes it, it doesn't just weaken magic. It changes what magic is. It becomes something that can be accumulated and hoarded rather than something that flows and cycles and tends the world, Harry said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than his own reading. Hermione stared at him. "Did you just know that?" "The houses know it," he said. "They've been watching him work toward it for decades. Some of them were watching before he had a body." She was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice that was doing a very good job of being steady, "Are you going to be all right?" "Not, magically. I know the power is fine. I mean, you. Harry." He turned to look at her properly. She was watching him with an intensity that was entirely separate from the intellectual problem she'd been dissecting, and in it was everything that had always made Hermione Granger extraordinary, the fact that she could hold both things at once. The enormous problem and the person. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. "Ask me again in a week." She nodded. "I'll put it in my diary." "Of course you will." Chapter 5, Subsection 3, Inquiry, Harry's Well-Being. "I'm not sure I should be in a subsection." "You're indexed, not subsectioned. There's a difference." She stood, tucking the book under her arm. "Sleep, Harry. Tomorrow Gringotts, and then we start on the actual work." "Tomorrow Gringotts," he agreed. She gave the password to the fat lady and went through. Harry stayed in the corridor a moment longer, his hand pressed flat against the stone wall, feeling the castle's immense and patient magic hum beneath his palm like a pulse. "I know," he said quietly. "To no one. To it. I know." The torches along the corridor brightened, almost imperceptibly. Harry smiled, just briefly, just to himself, and went inside. He slept without dreams for the first time in 11 weeks, and in the morning the scar didn't hurt, and when he opened his eyes to the red and gold of the Gryffindor dormitory, the sunlight through the windows was impossibly warm for September. Ron was watching him from across the room, already dressed, chewing on the end of his tie in a way that Hermione was going to have opinions about. "You look different," Ron said. "Do I?" "Yeah." Ron considered it. "Less like someone's about to hit you." He paused. "In a good way." Harry reached for his glasses. "Put them on." The dormitory came into focus, rumpled beds, morning light, the ordinary gorgeous mess of being 16 and alive and in a place that felt, against all his better efforts to stop it, like home. "Ron," he said. "I'm going to need you with me this year. Not watching my back, with me. There's a difference." Ron stopped chewing his tie. Something moved through his face, not surprise, exactly, more like the expression of someone who has been waiting to be asked. "Yeah, all right," he said, with the ease of someone accepting something he'd already decided on. Obviously. It was, Harry thought, exactly the right answer. They were at the Great Hall before most of the school, the four of them, Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Luna, who materialized from nowhere as she always did, carrying a plate of toast and a copy of the Quibbler with a headline that read, in enormous font, "The King Wakes, Editor's Column, page 12. Harry looked at it. Luna took a bite of toast. "Dad had a vision last April," she said serenely. "He's been holding the column for the right moment." "The right moment being the morning after," Hermione said. "Well, he didn't know the exact date," Luna said reasonably. Harry looked at the ceiling of the Great Hall, the enchanted sky, high and remote, showing the same September morning that was happening outside, clouds burning off in early light. He'd looked at this ceiling 500 times. He'd never felt the spellwork in it before, the layered, ancient charmwork of some of the finest magical craftsmanship in Britain, built by hands that had known the old ways, that had understood what magic was for. He understood it now. He could feel the intention in it, not just beauty or illusion but something more like a promise. Every student who sat under this sky and looked up was being told, subliminally, in the language that magic uses when it's speaking directly rather than through words, this is real. This world is real. You belong here. Harry, Neville said quietly. Harry came back. Neville was looking at him with that careful, precise attention. When we talked on the train, Neville said, about being with you this year. I need you to know," he stopped, working out the words. "My parents," he said finally. "What was done to them? The Death Eaters who did it are still out there. Bellatrix is still," he stopped again. "Neville," Harry said. "I need this to mean something," Neville said. "What's coming? I need it to be, not just survival. Not just stopping him. I need it to be, justice." Harry held his gaze. "Yes," he said simply. "No qualifications. No we'll see or I can't promise or it's complicated. Just yes. Because it would be. Because he could make that mean something now in a way he hadn't been able to yesterday." Neville let out a long, slow breath, and his shoulders dropped 2 inches, and he nodded once. Down the table, the other students were starting to filter in. The noise was building, the comfortable breakfast time roar, hundreds of individual conversations weaving into something that was more than the sum of its parts. And from the staff table, Harry felt a gaze land on him, Dumbledore, cup of tea in hand, watching with an expression that Harry couldn't read entirely. He was starting to understand, though. Starting to understand the particular loneliness of being the person in the room who knew the most, who carried the most, who made decisions that others would never know were being made. He'd always been in that position, actually. He just hadn't had the authority to match it. He reached for his pumpkin juice. "Right then," he said. "Let's talk about Gringotts." Chapter 2, The Shape of Old Names. The owl arrived at breakfast the next morning carrying a letter sealed in black wax, the crest pressed into it so old and precise that Hermione, when Harry passed it to her, turned it over in her hands twice before confirming what it was. "Gringotts," she said. "Harry, this is the director's seal. Not a branch manager. The actual director of Gringotts." "I know." Harry had felt the letter's arrival before the owl cleared the door. Not in a dramatic way, no lightning or vision. Just a quiet internal shift, the same way you register a sound you were already half expecting. He'd contacted Gringotts the night before through the flue in Dumbledore's office, using the liaison information the headmaster had provided without comment. He'd simply said his name and his titles and asked for an appointment at the earliest convenience. Apparently the earliest convenience was today. Ron read over Hermione's shoulder. "They want you there by noon." He looked up. "We've got double transfiguration at 11. "No we don't," Harry said. "McGonagall's going to love that. I'll speak to her." Harry took the letter back and folded it into his robe pocket. Across the table, Neville was cutting toast with the focused attention of someone listening very hard to a conversation while pretending to do something else. Luna was reading her father's column about the king waking, occasionally making small sounds of editorial approval. McGonagall, as it turned out, didn't love it. She loved it approximately as much as anyone loves being told that their class schedule is irrelevant to older and larger concerns, which is to say, not at all, and with considerable precision. "Mr. Potter," she said, catching him in the corridor outside the great hall, her tartan robes very upright, her expression composed in the way that composure is deployed as a weapon. "I understand you intend to absent yourself from my class this morning." "Yes, Professor." "On what grounds?" Harry looked at her. He'd always respected McGonagall, genuinely, not in the performative way students respected teachers they feared. She was sharp and fair and her loyalty was real. He said, "I'm going to Gringotts to claim 17 ancient lordships and arrange access to the vaults and records of the houses I've inherited. I'll be back by this evening and I'll arrange to catch up on anything I miss." McGonagall stared at him. "The claims include House Peverell," he added, "which I believe predates the founding of Hogwarts by approximately 400 years. She stared for another 2 seconds, then said, "See to it that you get the transfiguration notes from Miss Granger." She turned and walked away, and Harry had the distinct impression that she was going to be having a very interesting conversation with Dumbledore before the afternoon. They took a ministry-regulated port key from Hogsmeade. Hermione had arranged it the night before with an efficiency that suggested she'd been planning for contingencies Harry hadn't even thought of yet, and arrived in the lobby of Gringotts at 11:20, which gave them a comfortable margin before noon. Harry had been in Gringotts dozens of times. He knew the vast marble hall, the tellers at their high desks, the particular cold contempt with which the goblins regarded the humans who moved through their bank like guests who hadn't quite earned the invitation. He'd always found it faintly uncomfortable, that contempt, the way a fair criticism is uncomfortable. Today the hall felt different. Not the hall was the same. But as Harry walked through the doors, something happened in the space around him, a subtle shift in the room's attention. Tellers who never looked up from their ledgers looked up. A goblin crossing the hall with a stack of documents stopped and stared with an expression that had nothing to do with contempt and everything to do with recognition. The same recognition he'd felt from the 17 doors. Looking back at him from a goblin's amber eyes. The head teller was already coming around from behind his desk, which Harry had never seen happen, and he was not doing the slow and dismissive walk of goblin bureaucracy. He was moving with purpose. "Lord Potter Peverell," he said. The name landed in the marble hall with the solidity of something that had been waiting to be said for a very long time. "Director Ironteeth has been expecting you." Ron made a sound beside Harry that was not quite a word. "Lead the way," Harry said. The director's office was not where Harry expected it to be, not behind the teller desks or down the main corridors, but through a door that appeared in a wall he'd walked past 100 times and never seen a door in. The passage beyond was stone rather than marble, older, lit by lamps that burned something other than fire, the light amber and steady and warm in the particular way of old magic that has been tended rather than renewed. Director Ironteeth was ancient, even by goblin standards. Where most goblins Harry had encountered were sharp and contained in their agedness, Ironteeth was vast with it, not in size, she was compact as a fist, but in the way that stillness can be vast. She sat behind a desk of black wood carved with runes that Harry's new knowledge lit up like a map, ward marks. Oath marks. The ancient contracts between goblin kind and the houses. She looked at Harry with eyes that were the color of old amber, and in them was the expression of someone completing a very long equation. "Lord of the ancient houses," she said. Her voice was like struck stone, not harsh, but ringing. "King of magic. 83 years I have held this position. 3 of my predecessors held it before me. We have been waiting for this appointment since before your grandparents were born." Harry sat down. "Then I'm sorry to have kept you." Something that might have been approval crossed her face. "You are not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "More ceremony. More confusion." She folded her hands on the desk. The last time a candidate for the claiming arrived at this bank, it was 1943. He had been researching the claiming for years, came here with a prepared list of demands, and was escorted out when the claiming rejected him. She paused. "You come in from a school morning with ink on your left cuff." Harry glanced at his cuff. She was right. He hadn't noticed. "The claiming doesn't care about ceremony," he said. "No. It doesn't." She reached beneath the desk and produced a box, iron, flat, the size of a large book, and set it between them. "What I am about to show you is the summary document. The full records of the 17 houses, their holdings, their histories, and their current status exist in the vaults below. You will have unrestricted access. But the summary first, so that you understand the scope of what you have inherited." She opened the box. Inside, on a single sheet of parchment that should not have contained as much text as it did, were 17 names. Harry read them. He'd known Peverell. He'd half expected a few others, Potter, of course, which was listed as a cadet branch of an older house whose name he didn't recognize until it unfolded in his new memory, House of Gryffindor. He felt Ron go very still beside him, felt Hermione's sharp intake of breath. "Gryffindor," Harry said quietly. The sorting hat was not, as you may have supposed, merely a school tradition, Ironteeth said. It was a mechanism of the house. Godric Gryffindor built it as a tool for identifying which students carried the potential of his line. Not all of them blood relations, the house was never only about blood. It was about quality of courage. She touched the parchment. The other founders' houses are included, with the exception of Slytherin, whose line has been complicated. Voldemort, Harry said. He claims it. Whether the claiming is legitimate by the old measures is what the ancient protocols would determine. They have not been invoked in living memory. She looked at him. Until yesterday. Harry looked down the list. House of Merlin, that one landed like a stone in still water. Ravenclaw. Hufflepuff. Houses whose names he didn't recognize but whose character he felt, each distinct, each adding its particular note to the chord he'd been hearing since yesterday morning. A house of healers. A house of seers, that one warm and silver and faintly amused, which he suspected he'd be discussing with Luna. A house of makers, which felt like forge heat and precision and smelled, improbably, of sawdust. And at the bottom of the list, marked with a different ink, older and darker, House of the First Magic. Unnamed in any tongue. Recognition only. He looked at Iron Teeth. That last one. It has no name because it predates naming, she said. It is the oldest of the 17. It is what the others organize around. It is, she paused. In our tradition, we call it the root. Not a house in the sense of family or legacy. A house in the sense of ground. Harry felt it, the oldest door, the one of living stone. The warmth that had hit him like a wave at the end of the vision. Yes. Ground. That was exactly right. Hermione, beside him, had her notebook open and was writing at speed. She hadn't asked permission to take notes. He loved her for that. The holdings, Iron Teeth said, turning the parchment over. 17 vaults. 17 properties, some derelict, some maintained by the bank per the standing orders of the last lords who held the titles. Lands in Scotland, Wales, Ireland, France, and 2 locations that exist in what you might call the spaces between places, which require specific magical keys to access. She produced a ring from the box. This is the administrative seal. It is both key and credential. With it you can access all vaults, all properties, convene and dissolve formal proceedings of the ancient houses, and invoke the old charters in any magical court including the Wisengamot. Harry looked at the ring. It was heavy-looking, silver dark, set with 17 small stones each a different color, arranged not randomly but in a pattern that corresponded to the 17 doors in the claiming space. The stones caught the amber lamplight and returned it multiplied, and the ring was deeply, obviously magical in the way that very old, very serious objects are, not flashy, not theatrical. Just present. He picked it up and put it on. The 17 notes of the house's chord sounded together, not louder than before, but fuller. Like hearing a symphony after knowing it only as a melody. Now, Iron Teeth said, with what was definitely approval, there are matters of legal record that require your signature, and then I believe you will want to see the Peverell vault. Yes, Harry said. But first, the ritual. The one Voldemort is working toward. The goblin community knows about it. Ironteeth's expression didn't change. Her amber eyes did. You know of the severance ritual. I know what it would do. I don't know yet how far along he is. Further than we would like, Iron Teeth said. The ritual requires 7 anchors, 7 locations of concentrated ancient magical power. He has identified 5. 2 of the 17 houses' seats of power are among the 7 he needs. She folded her hands. We have been monitoring this development for 3 years. We did not know who to bring the information to, because there was no one with the authority to receive it, act on it, and be bound by the consequences of acting. Until yesterday. Which 2 houses? Harry asked. House of Merlin's primary seat, in what is currently a ruin in Wales. And the seat of House Ravenclaw, which is, she paused. Which has been hiding in plain sight for rather a long time. Hermione looked up from her notebook. Hogwarts, she said. Iron Teeth looked at her with the expression goblins reserved for humans who surprised them. The West Tower. Yes. Harry looked at Hermione. Hermione looked at Harry. The same thought passing between them in the shorthand of 6 years, Dumbledore. He knows about this too, Harry said. It wasn't a question. The headmaster has been guarding the Hogwarts anchor for 15 years, Iron Teeth confirmed. Since before your first year. There is a reason Hogwarts was made your destination. Harry sat with this for a moment. The warmth of the ring on his finger was steady, grounding. He wasn't angry, still that remarkable absence of the flinching, cornered anger that had always been his default response to learning that decisions had been made around him. He was simply understanding the shape of things, and the shape was becoming clearer. He placed me where the anchor was, Harry said, and near the second one, the Welsh ruin. And I was the candidate for the claiming. He was protecting 2 birds with one arrangement. While also, I believe, genuinely caring for your welfare, Iron Teeth said, with the dispassion of someone summarizing a ledger entry. These things are not mutually exclusive. No, Harry agreed. They're not. He signed the documents. 19 of them, the signatures witnessed by Iron Teeth and a goblin clerk who had not said a single word since entering the room and whom Harry had the impression was barely breathing. The signatures required blood, 1 drop each, from the ring finger of the right hand, and as each drop fell the relevant parchment absorbed it and the text shifted, the formal Latin resolving into English, each document sealing itself with a soft percussion that resonated in Harry's chest. When the last one was done, Iron Teeth looked at the completed stack with an expression that was, for a goblin, almost serene. It is recorded, she said. As of this moment, in the eyes of goblin law, the oldest continuous legal tradition in Britain, the 17 houses are claimed. The King of Magic is confirmed. Any action against your person or your authority is now subject to the full weight of those 17 covenants. What does that mean practically? Ron asked. He'd been very quiet through all of this, which was not Ron's natural state, which meant he'd been thinking hard. Iron Teeth considered him. It means that anyone who raises a wand against Lord Potter in an attempt to subjugate or destroy the authority he carries is not merely committing assault. They are committing an act of war against magic itself. The consequences are not administered by goblin law or wizard law. They are administered by the magic of the covenants. She paused. Even the Dark Lord, if he is aware of this, would hesitate. He doesn't hesitate, Harry said. Then he will learn what it costs to not hesitate. The Peverell vault was 3 levels below the standard Gringotts vaults, accessible by a cart that moved horizontally rather than on rails, the descent marked not by the damp and dark of the upper passages but by an increasing warmth, a deepening amber in the stone, as though the mountain itself was generating heat. When the vault door opened, responding to the ring without any additional key, the ancient lock recognizing the touch of the seal, Harry stepped into a space the size of Hogwarts' Great Hall. Ron said something that Hermione would later describe as not repeatable in formal company. It wasn't the gold. There was gold, certainly, stacked in columns that reached the carved ceiling, enough to make the Weasley family fortune look like loose change, and Harry was aware of it the way you're aware of whether you're standing in. But what stopped him in the doorway wasn't wealth. It was the other things. 3 walls were lined floor to ceiling with books, not standard shelving, books held in cases of glass-like material that hummed faintly with preservation charms. Thousands of volumes, some of them so old the covers had become indistinguishable from stone. A library of what the houses had accumulated, knowledge in the truest sense, not academic knowledge but living knowledge, the accumulated magical understanding of 17 different philosophical traditions spanning back further than any library in Hogwarts contained. At the center of the vault, on a stone plinth that was clearly part of the vault's original construction, were 3 objects. An invisibility cloak, his. He'd known it since first year. A stone, set into a simple ring of blackened silver. The resurrection stone. And a place where a third object should have been, the plinth surface showing a faint rectangular impression, like a shadow of something removed. The Elder Wand's resting place. Empty since Dumbledore had taken it from the grave of Antioch Peverell a century ago. Harry looked at the empty place for a long moment. "Harry," Hermione said carefully. "I know where it is," he said. "We'll deal with that properly when the time comes." He picked up the Resurrection Stone's ring carefully, not to use it, not yet, not here, and felt it settle into the pocket of his robe alongside the Gringotts seal ring. The two objects resonated faintly against each other through the fabric, like two notes that form a chord. Then he turned to the books. Hermione had been moving toward them the way a plant moves toward light, without consciously deciding to, simply oriented. She had both hands pressed against the preservation case of the nearest shelf and was reading the spines with an expression of concentrated reverence. "Harry," she said, her voice very controlled. "Some of these are books I have read about. In the history of magical theory. Books that were referenced in other texts as sources, as original works, as the foundational documents of entire branches of magic. Books that most scholars believed were lost." She turned to look at him. "They're not lost. They've been here. They're yours to read," he said. "All of them. Take whatever you need." She turned back to the shelves with the expression of someone who has been handed everything they have ever wanted and is trying to respond to it like an adult. Neville, who had been quietly examining a section of the vault that Harry hadn't looked at yet, said, "There's a botanical section here. Living specimens, somehow, in this light. Plants that are, Harry, there are plants in here that I've only ever read about. That I thought were extinct." "Neville." Harry walked to him. The botanical section was exactly as described, shelving units that were actually growing things, contained and thriving, the magic of the vault keeping them in a perpetual state of readiness. "All of yours. Same as the books." Neville looked at him. "Why?" It was a genuine question, not suspicious, but honest. "Why are you doing this?" "Because," Harry said, "what I'm going to do this year, what all of us are going to do, is not just stop Voldemort. It's rebuild what he's been tearing down. That's going to need people who know things. People who understand the magic that existed before it was narrowed down to what the Ministry decided was safe and what Hogwarts decided was appropriate." He looked at the botanical section, at the living impossible plants thriving in their amber-lit cases. "You're going to be the most important person in magical Britain this time next year. I need you knowing that before it happens." Neville was quiet for long enough that it might have been uncomfortable. But Neville's silences had never been empty. When he finally spoke, he said, "Right. Okay. A beat. I'm going to need a bigger greenhouse." "I'll buy you one," Harry said. They were back at Hogwarts by 4 o'clock, carrying more than they'd brought, Hermione with a satchel that shouldn't have closed but did via an undetectable extension charm, packed with texts that she handled with the gentle fervor of someone transporting art. Neville with 3 specimen cases. Ron carrying a flat package he'd noticed almost by accident, tucked at the back of a shelf labeled Potter Cadet House, Administrative Records, which had turned out to contain every family document, photograph, and artifact the Potter line had deposited at Gringotts going back 12 generations. Harry had watched Ron find it, watched him carry it over with the careful hands of someone handling something they understand the weight of. "Reckon this is yours," Ron had said, and his voice was doing something complicated. Harry had taken it, and they'd stood there for a second without saying anything, and that had been fine. The castle doors opened before Harry reached them. Not dramatically, they didn't fly open or swing wide with ceremony. They just opened, the left door swinging inward on its own, the way a door opens when someone inside knows you're coming and gets there ahead of you. "The castle," Hermione said. "Has always known," Harry said. "I just know it now too." McGonagall was waiting in the entrance hall. She looked at the satchel, the specimen cases, the flat package, and then at Harry, and said, "The headmaster would like a word." "After dinner," Harry said. She blinked. "I need to eat something," he said, not unkindly. I've been signing blood contracts for 3 hours and I'd like a meal before any more significant conversations. McGonagall looked at him for a moment with an expression that was moving through several phases, professional, evaluative, and landing finally on something that was not quite maternal and was absolutely not going to be acknowledged. "The roast is very good this evening," she said crisply, and walked away. Word had gotten around the castle the way word always does in Hogwarts, not through any reliable channel, but through the specific osmosis of a building full of teenagers with excellent hearing and powerful imaginations. By dinner, the great hall had an additional quality to its usual noise, a particular charged undertone, the way a crowd sounds when everyone is discussing the same thing in slightly different directions. Harry sat in his usual spot and ate his dinner and let it happen around him. The watching glances from every table. The whispered conversations that stopped and restarted when he looked up. Across the hall, the Slytherin table had a particular quality of studied indifference that was doing a great deal of work. Draco Malfoy was not eating. He was sitting very straight, food untouched, his prefect badge catching the candlelight, and he was looking at Harry with an expression that Harry hadn't seen on his face before. Not the sneer. Not the contempt. Not even the anxiety he'd occasionally glimpsed in 5th year. This was something else, something calculating, precise, and underneath both of those things, something close to afraid. Not afraid of Harry. That was the interesting part. Malfoy's fear was directed inward, or at something Harry couldn't see. Something Malfoy was working out on his own. Harry looked at him long enough to let Malfoy know he'd noticed, and then he looked away and ate his dinner. "He's been like that since the sorting," Ginny said, appearing beside him with a plate and the straightforward Weasley approach to inserting oneself into conversations. She nodded toward the Slytherin table. "He came back from summer looking like he's been dragged backward through something awful." "Whatever Voldemort's asked him to do, Ginny," Harry said. "Don't Ginny me, I've been watching this castle for 5 years and Draco Malfoy does not look like that unless he's been told something terrible is on his plate." She took a bread roll. "I'm just saying." Harry looked back at the Slytherin table. Malfoy had dropped his gaze to his plate, but his jaw was set in a way that spoke of someone grinding through a calculation with a very unpleasant answer. "I know," Harry said. "I see it. What are you going to do about it?" Harry thought about the 17 houses in his chest, including, notably, a House of Diplomacy, one of the smaller and less dramatic of the 17, but whose institutional memory was very, very clear on the topic of enemies who might be offered an alternative route. "Something unexpected," he said. Ginny considered this. "Should I be worried?" "Probably not on my behalf." He paused. "How are you, Gin?" She looked at him with the Weasley directness that never quite had the sharpness of rudeness but got to the point with impressive efficiency. "Better than you were in September," she said. "Which is saying something, because you looked like absolute rubbish when you got off the train last year." She paused. "You don't look like that anymore." "I heard that a lot today." "Maybe because it's obvious." She stood, bread roll in hand. "The 5th years are terrified of you, by the way. Not in a bad way. In the way they're terrified of the Forbidden Forest, like there's something in there that's bigger than they expected." She walked back to her section of the table, and Harry watched her go, and felt something warm settle in his chest that had nothing to do with the 17 houses. Dumbledore's office after dinner was different from the night before. Not in its arrangement, same instruments, same portraits, same phoenix, but in its texture. The headmaster had had a day to think, and a day for Dumbledore to think was a significant variable. He'd also apparently spoken to McGonagall, because there was tea waiting on the desk, and 2 cups, and the instruments that had been monitoring Harry were no longer pointed at the chair he'd occupied last night. Dumbledore waited until Harry had sat and poured his own tea, which was, Harry understood, a deliberate act of concession from a man whose instinct was always to be the one who poured, before speaking. "The Ravenclaw anchor," he said. "You know. The West Tower." "Yes." Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the weariness in them was real, and Harry felt it as such rather than as a manipulation. "I have been protecting it," he said, "in the only way available to me. By keeping it unseen. The wards on that section of the tower are mine, built over 15 years, and they are very good. But they are not permanent, and they are not, as of yesterday, necessary. Because the rightful lord of the house is now in residence," Harry said. "Yes. The Welsh ruin. House of Merlin's seat. What's the current state of it?" "Unsecured," Dumbledore said. "It has been for some time. The location is known to the Death Eaters." He paused. "I believe they have already conducted preliminary rituals at that site. The anchor is damaged but not yet destroyed. Can it be repaired?" Dumbledore looked at him. "By the Lord of the House, invoking the ancient protocols. Theoretically. In practice, no one has done it in 7 centuries. He paused. "But then, nothing about your situation exists cleanly within theoretically." Harry set down his cup. "I'm going to need access to the castle's wards. Not just knowledge of them, administrative access. The ability to modify them." Dumbledore was very still. "That is traditionally the headmaster's domain." "I know. I'm not asking to take it from you. I'm asking to work alongside you, to extend the ward's coverage and integrate the House Ravenclaw authority with the castle's existing protections. It will make both stronger." He looked at Dumbledore. "That's not a power grab. That's how the old system was designed to work." "The king and the keeper," Dumbledore said softly, something moving through his face that was recognition and, beneath it, relief. "The castle has always had a dual authority. The headmaster maintains. The king, grounds." "Yes." Silence. Fawkes made the low meditative sound again, watching them both with the ancient patience of something that has watched a great many important conversations unfold over a great many centuries. Dumbledore said, "There are things I need to tell you. About that year. What I knew and when I knew it and what I chose, and what was chosen for me." He looked old, briefly, not in his usual mythic way but in the way of a man genuinely tired. "Some of it is going to make you angry." "Probably," Harry said. "Tell me anyway." "Not tonight." He held up a hand, not stalling, Harry felt, but genuinely. "Tonight I need you to understand one thing first, before any of the complicated truths, because the complicated truths will come better if you have this as a foundation." "Yes." Harry nodded. "I have loved you," Dumbledore said. "Badly, often. With poor judgment about means, with too much calculation and too little honesty. I have loved you the way I love all things I fear losing, which is to say, with too tight a grip. But I have loved you. The claiming, the 17 houses, what you are, none of that changes that. And it does not diminish it. It is simply, what is true." Harry looked at the old man for a long moment. He thought about the summer. The cupboard under the stairs, or near enough. The silence from Dumbledore's end that had lasted for months and been explained as protection and had mostly just felt like abandonment. He thought about Sirius, and the Department of Mysteries, and all the ways he'd been managed and directed and not trusted, and he held all of it in his head alongside this exhausted true admission. He said, "I know. And I've never doubted it. Loving someone and making the right choices for them are different skills, and you're better at the first than the second." He paused. "So am I, probably. We'll work on it." Dumbledore made a sound that was, improbably, a laugh. Small, startled, genuine. "The ward access," he said. "I'll arrange it for tomorrow." "Thank you." Harry stood. "One more thing. The ministry needs to know about the claiming. Not in a press release, in the formal legal channels. The Wizengamot has ancient obligations to the King of Magic that are written into its founding charter and have been dormant for 2 centuries. I need them invoked. Cornelius Fudge will, Fudge can react however he likes. Harry moved toward the door. The charter obligations don't require his approval. They require my invocation. Which I'll be doing by the end of the week. He paused at the door. Who on the Wizengamot can I trust? Dumbledore thought for a moment. Amelia Bones. Griselda Marchbanks. Augusta Longbottom. Harry nodded. Good place to start. He left, and the portraits watched him go, and Phineas Nigellus, who had been pretending to sleep in his frame above the bookshelf, opened one eye and said, to the room rather than to Dumbledore, well. He's exactly what the old ones promised. Took long enough. It always does, Dumbledore said. That night, in the Gryffindor common room, Harry spread the 17 house seals, printed copies Iron Teeth had provided, one per house, showing the name, the founding principle, and the seal mark, across the low table by the fire. Hermione and Neville sat on either side of him. Ron was on the floor, long legs stretched toward the hearth, reading the Potter family administrative records with the focused attention of someone doing research they find genuinely interesting rather than obligatory. Luna appeared from the girls' staircase, still in her daytime clothes, and sat cross-legged beside Ron without explanation, which was simply how Luna moved through the world. Marchbanks is solid, Hermione said, tapping the Wizengamot notes she'd been compiling. She was on the board for your OWLs, she was the one who told Fudge off last year in The Prophet. Augusta Longbottom, she glanced at Neville. My grandmother, Neville said, would walk through fire for the right cause, in good shoes, with an opinion about everyone else's footwear along the way. A beat. She'll love this. She's been saying for 20 years that the old houses should have been invoked to override Fudge's denial about Voldemort. Can you reach her? Owl tonight, she'll respond by tomorrow morning. She wakes at 5. He paused. She'll want to meet you. Properly. She has standards about proper meetings. She can set the terms, Harry said. Ron looked up from the family records. He was holding a photograph, an old one, black and white, showing two people Harry didn't recognize in formal robes, standing in front of a manor house he'd never seen. He held it out. Is this, I think this might be your great-great-grandparents. According to the registry. But Harry, this house, do you recognize this house? Harry leaned across. He looked at the photograph, and the House of Potter's institutional memory offered up the answer with the calm specificity of a well-organized archive. Potter Hall, he said. Northumberland. It's one more actions request aborted. Right, the next chapter now. Chapter 3, the court assembles. Potter Hall had been empty for 16 years. Harry knew this the way he knew everything the houses gave him, not as memory exactly, more as fact that had always been present and was only now being accessed, like a file that had been there all along, waiting for someone to open the drawer. The hall had been sealed after his parents' deaths, the estate held in protective stasis by Gringotts, maintained against decay but not against silence. 16 years of silence in a house that had been built for noise. They arrived on a Thursday morning, Harry, Hermione, Neville, and Ron, plus Luna, who had invited herself with the serene confidence of someone who has checked the relevant omens and found them favorable. The portkey deposited them in the forecourt, and the house looked at them through its tall windows the way houses do when they know the person arriving matters. It was not Malfoy Manor. It was not a statement of wealth or dominance. Potter Hall was a working house, built to be lived in, warm stone, long windows, a garden that was 16 years overgrown but still visibly the product of someone who had loved it, climbing roses gone wild across the east wall, an oak tree in the side yard that was simply enormous and completely indifferent to everything that had happened to the family it had been growing beside. Harry stood in the forecourt for a moment. Ron stood beside him, not saying anything, which was the right thing. Then Harry walked to the front door, touched the lock with the seal ring, and the house opened. Inside smelled of closed rooms and cedar and something underneath both of those things, something that was simply his. He didn't allow himself to stand still in the entrance hall and feel it, because if he did that he would need a significant amount of time and this was not the moment. He filed it. He walked through. "We need the formal receiving room," he said. "Ground floor, east wing." The house's memory told him where it was before he'd finished the sentence, and he led them there without a second's hesitation. The receiving room was exactly what it needed to be. Large enough for a significant gathering, with a long table of dark oak down its center, chairs that the preservation charms had kept in good condition, windows overlooking the wild garden. At the table's head, a single chair that was architecturally distinct from the others, not a throne, nothing that ostentatious, just a chair with a slightly higher back and the unmistakable quality of something that had been made for a specific purpose and had been waiting for that purpose to show up. Hermione walked the length of the table touching the woodwork with her fingertips, reading the runes carved into the edge. "These are oath marks," she said. "This table was built for formal proceedings. Anything said here while the house authority is active is bound, it has the weight of a sworn testimony." "I know," Harry said. "So everything said in this room, everyone who sits at this table, means what they say?" "Yes." She looked at the table with the expression she got when she found something beautiful. "That's remarkable. It's also enormously useful." He turned to look at all of them. "The invitations go out today. We have a week. I want the heads of every significant old family in Britain sitting at this table, not the blood-purist families, not Voldemort's inner circle, but everyone who isn't already fully committed to either side. The people who have been sitting on the fence because they didn't know what to commit to. The people who've been waiting for something to make sense." He paused. "We're also inviting Augusta Longbottom, Amelia Bones, and Griselda Marchbanks. And Xenophilius Lovegood." Luna looked up from examining the window latch. "Dad will be so pleased. He's been keeping the good quill ready since April." "And Draco Malfoy," Harry said. Silence. Ron's expression went through several stages at speed. Neville went very still. "Harry," Hermione said carefully. "He's coming," Harry said. "Not a discussion. He represents the Malfoy family, and the Malfoy family's political connections reach half the fence-sitters in Britain. And," he paused. "He's frightened. Not of me. Of what he's been asked to do. I want to give him a door before he does something that closes all his other doors permanently." Neville said, "And if he's already past that point? Then this table will tell us." Harry touched the oath-marked edge. "He can't lie here. Neither can I. Neither can anyone." Ron looked at the table with the expression of someone reassessing several things simultaneously. "Right," he said. "All right. But I reserve the right to be extremely skeptical and possibly rude." "Noted," Harry said. "Hermione, I need the invitation language, formal, in the ancient house convention. There are templates in the hall study, I'll show you." "Neville, Augusta Longbottom needs a personal letter rather than a formal invitation, and it should come from you first. I'll add my own note, but she needs to hear it from her grandson." "She does," Neville agreed. "She'll say yes regardless. But she'll be more gracious about it if I ask first." "Luna, your father, already done," Luna said. Harry blinked. "I only decided to invite him 30 seconds ago. Dad's been expecting an invitation for months. I owed him last night when I decided you'd decide." She smiled her distant smile. "He'll be early. The invitations went out by Friday. By Saturday, the responses were coming back. By Sunday, the full picture was clear. 15 of the 18 invitations had been accepted. 2 were politely declined with language that was coded as 'We are watching and will honor the outcome.' 1, Thaddeus Knott, whose father was a known Death Eater, came back with a brief note that said only, 'I will be there.' Draco Malfoy's response arrived on Sunday evening, alone, by a private owl that Harry had never seen before, sleek and silent, dropping the letter and departing without waiting for a reply. The letter was short. It said, "I received your invitation. I'm aware of what that table does. I am coming anyway." And below that, in slightly different ink, like a postscript added after, "Whatever you think you know about my situation, you're probably underestimating it." Harry read it twice, and then put it in the flat box he'd been using to file correspondence, and thought about Draco Malfoy, not the Malfoy of the past 5 years, the sneering and the mud-blood and the cruelty that had always had the specific quality of performance rather than conviction. The Malfoy of this year, the one who hadn't been eating, who'd been sitting straight-backed and frightened at the Slytherin table, who had apparently decided that a room where he couldn't lie was preferable to whatever his other options were. He was running out of road, Harry thought. And he was smart enough to know it. Potter Hall on Thursday afternoon looked nothing like it had on Thursday morning. The receiving room had been cleaned and aired and the preservation charms refreshed, the long tables set with food and drink that Harry had arranged through Gringotts Estate Management Service rather than Hogwarts house elves, because this was not Hogwarts business. The windows let in October light, low and amber, laying bars of gold across the dark oak. The runes in the table's edge were visible, not glowing, nothing that theatrical, but visible, the way the grain of good wood is visible. Present. Meaningful. They arrived over the course of an hour. Augusta Longbottom came first, which said everything necessary about her. She was formidable in the specific way that only women who have spent decades being more capable than the room expect them to become formidable, settled into it, no longer having to prove anything, simply being it. Her hat had a stuffed vulture on it that Harry found alarming. She shook his hand with both of hers, looked at him with sharp eyes the same shape as Neville's, and said, "You have your mother's coloring and your father's jaw, and I knew them both. What you are doing here honors their memory. Now sit down and let's get to it." Amelia Bones came second, with the careful efficiency of someone who had allocated exactly the right amount of time and didn't intend to waste any of it. She was broad-shouldered, monocled, currently the head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and she had the look of someone who had been waiting for this specific meeting for years and was furious it had taken this long to happen. Griselda Marchbanks was 93 years old and moved with the speed of a woman who had decided there was no more time to waste. She had examined Harry's OWLs personally and given him top marks in defense, and she greeted him now with the efficiency of someone ticking a box they'd been waiting to tick. "I tested you," she said. "I thought then that you were extraordinary. I now understand why. Sit down, boy, we have things to do." The old family heads came in ones and twos, Greengrass, Zabini, Davis, Abbott, Bones cousins Harry hadn't known about, names that represented the complex political middle of British wizarding society, the families who were pure-blooded by heritage but not by conviction, who had been watching Voldemort's rising with private terror and public neutrality because there was nothing to anchor to on the other side except the Ministry's increasingly panicked incompetence. They sat. They looked at the rune-marked table. They looked at Harry. Thaddeus Knott sat at the far end. He was 17, same year as Harry, with his father's sharp features softened by his mother's bone structure and eyes that were currently doing a great deal of work to appear unconcerned. He was not unconcerned. He was the most alone person in the room, Harry thought, and had come anyway. Xenophilius Lovegood arrived exactly on time, which Luna had predicted, wearing robes that were aggressively turquoise and carrying a leather satchel that was making sounds. He sat beside his daughter, accepted a cup of tea from the sideboard, and produced a notebook, all in one continuous movement. And then, last, Draco Malfoy. He came alone. No Crabbe, no Goyle, no Pansy Parkinson at his shoulder. Just Malfoy in neat dark robes, his father's platinum hair and his mother's cheekbones and the specific bearing of someone who has been raised to enter rooms like he owns them and is currently entering one that he knows belongs to someone else. He found the last open chair, which was, not accidentally, across the table from Harry, and sat down, and put both hands flat on the table in a gesture that was either openness or surrender and might have been both. The room looked at him. He looked at Harry. Harry said, "Thank you all for coming." His voice carried in the room without effort, not because he projected it but because the room itself was suited to this, the acoustics of a space built for significant speech. And because he meant it, which the table apparently amplified in its way. "I'm not going to give a speech about what's at stake," he said. You all know what's at stake. You've known for years. Most of you have been waiting for someone to give you a reason to stop waiting. He looked around the table. This is the reason. 17 ancient houses, claimed and active for the first time in 2 centuries. The legal authority of the King of Magic, recognized by Gringotts and soon to be formally invoked before the Wisengamot. An alternative to the Ministry's inadequacy and Voldemort's desecration that isn't just resistance, it's restoration. Augusta Longbottom said, restoration of what, specifically? Of the magical world's actual governing structure. Not the Ministry. The Ministry is a useful administrative body, and it can continue to be one. But the Wisengamot's founding charter describes the King of Magic's court as the highest authority in matters that concern magic's fundamental nature. Voldemort's severance ritual, a ripple through the room at the name of the ritual, so several of them already knew about it, is exactly that kind of matter. It cannot be stopped by Ministry action or aura response. It requires the invocation of the ancient charters. Which require the court, Amelia Bones said. She was leaning forward slightly. The formal court. Not just an advisory body, a court with legal standing. Yes, Harry said. 17 houses seated. Full quorum. The Wisengamot's charter obligations activated. A legal structure that supersedes the Ministry in this specific domain. He paused. I'm not staging a coup. The Ministry can go on minding its own business. But what Voldemort is doing is not Ministry business. It never was. It's always been this. Silence while the table absorbed this. Thaddeus Knott said, "What do you want from families like mine?" His voice was controlled, careful. The kind of careful that is itself a kind of courage. Harry looked at him. I want you to not have to choose between your family and the right thing, he said. I want there to be a third path that your father can't close for you. He paused. I can't promise it's safe. I can promise it's real. Knott looked at him for a long moment with the eyes of someone calculating a leap. He said, my father will know I was here. I know. And you're inviting me anyway. Yes. Knott looked at the table, at the rune marks, at the food he hadn't touched. Then I'm in, he said. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just placed down on the table like a decision that had already been made and simply needed saying. Draco Malfoy had been very still throughout all of this. Now he said, the ritual. His voice was tight, controlled, the voice of someone managing information carefully even in a room where careful management is impossible. You said he needs 7 anchor points. 5 identified. He looked at Harry. He's given the 6th to someone in this room. The quality of the silence changed entirely. Harry kept his eyes on Malfoy. I know. Malfoy blinked. You know. I know who. I know why. I know it wasn't entirely a choice. He watched something move through Malfoy's face, fast and complex and not quite masked. I'm not going to name them here, because this table doesn't require confession, it requires honesty, and those are different. The person who was given that task knows who they are and knows that I know. He paused. And they also know that I'm offering them the same thing I'm offering Knott. A third path. The room was very quiet. Malfoy's jaw was working. His hands were still flat on the table, still that gesture of openness, and his eyes, which Harry had always thought of as cold and dismissive, were doing something else entirely now. They were searching. Looking for the catch, the angle, the manipulation underneath the offer. Why? Malfoy said. Because the alternative, Harry said, is that you complete your mission, and magic diminishes, and the world becomes something smaller and colder, and you spend the rest of your life knowing that you helped make it that way. He held Malfoy's gaze. Or you don't complete it, and you face the consequences of failing Voldemort without protection, and you and your mother suffer for it. A beat. Those are your current options. I'm offering a fourth one. Fourth, Malfoy said. You said third. Third was for not. Yours is different. He looked at Draco Malfoy across the rune-marked table, in the afternoon light of a house that had been built for exactly this kind of conversation, and said, with the simplicity of something true, I need someone inside. Someone who knows what he's planning, who his people are, what the ritual requires. I need you to be that person. Not as a spy who works for me, as someone who is choosing, from their own reasons, to end a war before it takes everything from them. Malfoy was silent for so long that the candles on the sideboard burned down a visible amount. Then he said, My mother. Protected, Harry said. Formally, by house covenant. The moment you sit at this table in that capacity, anyone who moves against Narcissa Malfoy moves against the 17 houses. Voldemort included. He'll learn what that means, Harry said. The same way everyone else is going to learn. Malfoy looked at the table. At the rune marks. At Harry. He said, with an edge that was not quite contempt and not quite humor but had elements of both, You're very confident for someone who's been carrying all this for 4 days. 5, Harry said. And yes. Something cracked in Malfoy's expression, not dramatically, not in any way he'd have wanted witnessed, but the table was what it was and everyone saw it. He said, quietly, he gave me a task that I believe is going to kill me whether I succeed or fail. He gave it to me because of my father's failure at the ministry, as punishment for the family. My mother knows. She can't stop it. He paused. I came here because I've run every alternative and this is the only door left. I know that, Harry said. I'm still opening it. Another silence, different from all the previous ones. This one had a quality of things settling. Of a room full of people who have been holding breath releasing it. Augusta Longbottom, who had been watching this exchange with the focused attention of a hawk over a very interesting field, said, Lord Potter. Practical matters. Yes, Harry said. The Wizengamot invoking. Timeline. End of next week. I want the formal petition filed before Fudge knows what's happening. Fudge will fight it. He'll lose, Amelia Bones said, in the clipped voice of someone who has been wanting to say that for approximately 2 years. The anchor point Malfoy was given, Marchbanks said. What is it? We'll discuss that in a smaller session, Harry said. Before we leave today. The Welsh ruin, Greengrass said. He was a quiet man, mid-50s, with his daughter Daphne's precision of expression. Merlin's seat. We have property adjacent. My groundskeeper has been watching it for 3 years. Something happened there in August. Preliminary ritual, Harry said. The anchor is damaged, not destroyed. I need to repair it. Can you? Hermione asked, and then immediately looked like she hadn't meant to say it out loud, which made Harry smile briefly. Let's find out, he said. The smaller session afterward was 5 people, Harry, Hermione, Neville, Malfoy, and Amelia Bones. They sat at the end of the long table, the rest of the room emptied, the afternoon light gone golden and long. Malfoy told them about the vanishing cabinet. He told it the way he'd been holding it, with the compressed precision of someone who has been carrying information they can't afford to have taken wrong, watching Harry's face as he spoke. The cabinet in the room of requirement. Its pair at Borgin and Burke's. The plan to use it to bring Death Eaters into Hogwarts. He's targeting the Ravenclaw anchor, Malfoy said. The West Tower. Once he has people inside the castle, they can reach it. The castle's protections would be bypassed because the attackers are already inside. Amelia Bones made a sound. When? He wanted it done by December. He told me, Malfoy stopped. Worked through something. He told me what happens to my family if I fail. He's not going to get the chance to carry that out, Harry said. Malfoy looked at him with the expression he'd been wearing all day, the one looking for the catch. You keep saying things like that. Because I keep meaning them, Harry said. You've been carrying the authority of 17 houses for 5 days. You're 16 years old. Yes, Harry said. Not dismissively. Just, yes. All of it, true. I'm also the person who's fought Voldemort 4 times and won every one. Not by being older or having more resources. He paused. The cabinet in the room of requirement, can you access it? Yes. Then don't repair it, Harry said. Whatever work you've done on it, stop. Let him think it's slow progress. Buy us time. He looked at Malfoy. Can you do that? Keep up the appearance of working on it while actually stalling? For how long? Until we've secured both anchors and invoked the Wizengamot Charter. Maybe 6 weeks. Malfoy considered this with the face of someone running risk calculations at speed. 2 months is possible. Past that, he'll send someone to check on me. 6 weeks is all I need. Bones had been quiet, processing. Now she said, the aura implications of this, if I can get the department secured before the formal invocation, I can have teams ready to move on the Death Eater network the moment the charter gives us the authority. She looked at Harry. I need the Wizengamot petition to also include emergency enforcement powers delegated to the department, recognized by the ancient charters. Draft it, Harry said. I'll sign whatever you need. She looked at him with the expression of someone who has spent a career swimming upstream against Ministry current and has just been handed, unexpectedly, the concept of downstream. I've been waiting for this, she said. Not emotionally. Just factually. I know, Harry said. Neville, who had been taking notes throughout with the quiet precision he developed in that first year of defense against the dark arts when none of the teachers had been worth paying attention to but the material was vital, looked up and said, the Malfoy family's protection under House Covenant. How does that work, exactly? Because I want to make sure it's real before we tell Draco to stake his life on it. Harry explained it. Hermione supplied the legal framework, citing sources that she had apparently memorized in the last 4 days from the Gringotts vault texts, while Malfoy sat across the table and listened to the description of his family's protection being built in real time with an expression that was doing everything it could to stay neutral and not quite managing it. When they were done, Neville said, it's real, and Hermione said, it's ironclad, and Malfoy looked at the table for a moment and said, very quietly, to no one specifically, my mother's going to think I've completely lost my mind. She's going to be safe, Harry said. That's better than sane. Malfoy looked up at him. Something in his face had shifted, the last of the performance was gone, the sneer and the calculation and the carefully maintained silver-backed superiority that had been Draco Malfoy's public face since the age of 11. What was underneath was just a boy who was very tired and had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time. Why do you care? Malfoy asked. He wasn't being hostile. He genuinely wanted to know. About my mother. About me. You and I have been, I know what we've been, Harry said. I also know that almost everything you've ever done to me was a performance for an audience that required it. He paused. I'm not forgiving anything. I'm not pretending history didn't happen. I'm saying that the history doesn't have to determine the future. Another pause. And I care about your mother because she's a person in a terrible situation who loves her child and can't protect him. I tend to care about that kind of situation. It's a pattern. Malfoy said nothing for a moment. Then he said, the Vanishing Cabinet will show minimal progress for 6 weeks. If he sends anyone to check on it, I'll let you know first. He pushed his chair back. I'm going back to Hogwarts. If I stay away longer than this, it'll be noticed. Harry stood too. Malfoy. Malfoy paused. The task he gave you. Specifically, not just the cabinet. He gave you a person to kill, didn't he? Malfoy's face went very still. The afternoon light was harsh from this angle. Yes, he said. Harry looked at him steadily. Not going to happen. You can't, I can, Harry said. And I will. You have my word. He held Malfoy's gaze. And you know this table means that. Malfoy looked at the rune-marked surface. He nodded once, barely perceptible, like a man conceding a point he's been arguing in his own head for months. He left without further ceremony. His footsteps crossed the entrance hall, the front door opened and closed, and the house held his absence for a moment with the particular quality of a space where something significant has just occurred. Neville said, "He believed you." "He needed to," Harry said. Hermione was very carefully not saying "I hope you're right," which meant she was thinking it loudly. Harry caught her eye and she shrugged one shoulder, her version of "I'm with you, proceed," and started closing her notebook. "The Welsh ruin," Ron said. He'd appeared in the doorway from the hall, where he'd been standing throughout the smaller session in the unarticulated but constant capacity of someone making sure everything stayed honest. "When are we going?" "This weekend," Harry said. "I need 2 days of preparation and then we go. Quickly, before the anchor deteriorates further." He looked at the faces around the table, Hermione, Neville, Ron, Luna framed in the doorway beyond Ron with a serene expression that suggested she'd been exactly where she needed to be all day. "The 5 of us." "Not Malfoy," Ron said. "Not yet," Harry said. "Not Dumbledore." Harry thought about this for a moment. "I'll tell him we're going. I won't ask permission." He paused. "He'll argue. Then he'll help with the preparation and let us go anyway, because he'll know there's no argument he can make that holds." Ron considered this. "He's going to be annoyed." "Probably," Harry said. "He gets annoyed the way rain gets annoying, periodically, from above, mostly harmless." Ron smiled at that, properly, the full Weasley grin that was one of Harry's favorite sights in the world, wide and warm and lighting up his whole face. "Right then," he said. "Wales." "Wales," Harry agreed. Outside the long windows of Potter Hall, the October garden was going amber and rust, the overgrown roses catching the last of the afternoon light. The oak tree in the side yard was enormous against the sky. The house was warm around them, not from the fire alone but from the quality of being occupied, of having people in it who belonged there, doing the work that the people who built it had always hoped someone would come back to do. Hermione was already writing, naturally, her quill moving across a new page, notes, plans, the structural framework of everything they'd decided, rendered into the kind of organized clarity that turned possibility into action. Luna reached past Ron to take a biscuit from the sideboard. "The Crumplehorn Snorkack migration passes through Wales in October," she said thoughtfully. "I'll bring extra recording equipment." "Luna," Hermione said. "Yes. We're going to a damaged ancient magical anchor that Voldemort's partially ritually desecrated." "I know," Luna said. "That's why it's fortunate the Snorkacks will be there. They're very calming in a crisis." Harry pressed his mouth together to contain something that was definitely a laugh. The afternoon light moved across the table, across the rune marks, across the hands and faces of 5 people who had decided, together, what came next. Outside, the oak tree stood in a golden October air, patient and enormous, indifferent to everything except the season. Chapter 4, The Fire Under the School. Wales in October was not subtle about it. The hills above the Brecon Beacons came at them sideways in the Portkey landing, grey sky pressed low, wind with teeth in it, the kind of cold that finds the gap between your collar and your neck and settles there. The ruin was visible immediately, which surprised Harry. He'd expected something hidden, something requiring navigation. But the seat of House Merlin sat on the hillside with the blunt patience of something that had stopped bothering to conceal itself, a tumble of dressed stone on a natural platform above the valley, the bones of walls still standing in places, the foundation intact and unmistakable. And wrong. He felt it before he'd taken 20 steps toward it, a sour note in the chord the houses sang in his chest, one frequency badly damaged, like a string wound too tight and beginning to unravel. "You can feel it," Hermione said. "Not a question." "It's like a bruise," Harry said. "On the air." Ron had his wand out. Not pointed at anything, just out, the habit of someone who'd learned that the preparation matters. Neville was scanning the hillside above them with the focused attention of a naturalist reading terrain, which in this case meant he was reading the magical disturbances in the landscape the way he'd have read soil conditions. Luna was taking readings with an instrument from her satchel that appeared to be a brass compass with several extra hands, all pointing in slightly different directions. 3, Luna said. 3 what? Ron asked. 3 separate ritual impressions. 1 old, very old, this is the founding work. 1 recent, August, partially complete. She turned the compass slowly. 1 very recent. Within the last fortnight. Harry went still. He's been back. Or sent someone, Neville said. They spread without being told to, the automatic adjustment of people who had learned to move in contested space, widening the distance between them so one curse couldn't catch all of them. Harry walked directly toward the ruined center, and the sour note in his chest grew sharper with each step, resolving from a general wrongness into something more specific, a structured desecration. Not random damage. Deliberate, careful, the magical equivalent of someone picking a lock rather than breaking a door. He knew what it was the moment he saw the marks on the foundation stone. They'd been carved into the oldest layer, not Voldemort's work, too recent for that, but someone who knew the language had carved them recently over the top of the original working, like graffiti written in a language that could physically harm the wall. 7 glyphs, arranged in a partial circle, 3 of them already active. He could see the faint residue of completed ritual burning around them like old coals. The other 4 were prepared but not yet lit. Prepared. Not attempted and abandoned. Prepared. Waiting. He's going to come back, Harry said. Soon. Hermione was beside him, crouching to read the glyphs. These are in a tradition I've only seen referenced once, in one of the Peverell Vault texts. Pre-ministry, pre-Hogwarts. This is old magic being used backwards. She looked up at him. Whoever did this wasn't just following a recipe. They understood what they were doing. Voldemort understands everything he does, Harry said. That's what makes him dangerous. He studied the 4 prepared glyphs. Can you document these exactly? Every line, every proportion. Already doing it. Harry straightened and put his hand on the foundation stone, flat-palmed, the seal ring against ancient rock. The House of Merlin's signature rose to meet him, not healthy, not the clean resonant note it should have been, but present. Damaged and present. The way a person is present when they're injured, still themselves beneath the wound. He pressed harder and felt the house's memory move through him, centuries of it, the original founding, the purpose of this seat, the principle it held. House of Merlin was not about power, which surprised him until it didn't. It was about transformation. Not the kind you performed on objects or opponents, the kind you underwent yourself. The principle that genuine mastery requires the master to be changed by what they master. No wonder Voldemort wanted to sever it. It was the principle most directly opposed to everything he was. Harry. Ron's voice, from the perimeter. Company. 3 of them came over the ridge from the north, moving fast and low with the specific body language of people who'd been told to check on something and found something unexpected instead. Death Eaters, not in robes, not masked, which made them more dangerous in the open air. 2 men and a woman, wands already out. The nearest one stopped when he saw Harry. Genuinely stopped, 1 foot mid-step, recognition crossing his face and then something else, uncertainty, the specific kind that comes from knowing who you're looking at and knowing that changes everything about what you were sent to do. Harry said, "You were sent to check on the ritual markings." The man didn't answer. Behind Harry, he heard Neville and Luna move, not retreating, repositioning. "I'm going to ask you to leave," Harry said. "Not because I'm afraid of a fight. Because I'd rather you carry a message back than not carry it at all." "You're a child," the woman said. She'd found her footing again, was raising her wand. Harry looked at her. He didn't raise his wand. He didn't shift his stance. He simply looked at her with the full attention of someone who holds the authority of 17 ancient houses and has no particular emotional investment in being underestimated. The ring on his finger caught the grey October light and the 17 stones caught it and returned it, and the warmth in his chest pulsed once, steady and enormous. The woman's wan hand dropped 2 inches. Involuntarily. Her eyes went wide. The message, Harry said, is that this site is now under the formal protection of the King of Magic. Any further ritual work here will be met not just by me but by the full legal and magical weight of the ancient house charters. He knows what that means. He paused. Tell him I said hello. The 3 of them looked at each other. Something passed between them, the rapid calculation of people who were sent with a task and have encountered a variable that resets all their math. They left. Over the ridge and gone. Ron exhaled. That's going to bring a response. Yes, Harry said. Good. He turned back to the foundation stone. We have maybe an hour before word gets back and something larger comes. Hermione, I need those markings documented in the next 10 minutes. Then we seal this site and I repair what I can. Can you repair it in 10 minutes? Neville asked. The repair takes as long as it takes, Harry said. But I can seal the prepared glyphs so they can't be activated. That's the immediate priority. The full repair is a longer working, I'll need to come back. He looked at Neville. I need you to build a ward perimeter. Not defensive, not the standard shield variation. Something alive. Something that treats this site as living ground and responds to it. Neville blinked. I've never done anything like, yes you have, Harry said. Every ward you've ever built for your greenhouse. Same principle, different application. The land here is saturated with Merlin's founding working, it wants to be protected. You're not creating something new, you're working with what's already there. Neville looked at the hillside with the expression he got when something clicked into the right orientation. He crouched and pressed his palm to the ground the way Harry had pressed his to the stone, and for a moment was very still. Then he nodded once and stood and walked to the perimeter and began. Harry watched him go and felt, from the House of Merlin's damaged but present memory, something that was very close to satisfaction. The sealed glyphs took 8 minutes. Not a dramatic working. Harry sat cross-legged on the cold ground before the foundation stone and placed both hands over the prepared ritual marks and simply reversed the intent. Not destroyed, he didn't have the authority to destroy work he didn't fully understand yet, and destroying partially complete ritual work of this age and power without knowing all its connections would be like cutting a wire without knowing what it powered. He sealed it. Wrapped the intent of the glyphs in the House of Merlin's principle, transformation, fundamental change, and turned the energy back on itself. The 4 prepared glyphs went dark. Quietly, like lamps turned down. He stood up and his knees were wet from the grass and it was still very cold and Hermione had filled 12 pages of documentation in the time he'd been working and was on her 13th. Done, he said. Luna lowered her brass compass. The sour note is gone, she said. It still sounds injured. But it doesn't sound poisoned. She tilted her head. Like when the Snargaluffs are ill. Better, but not well. Better is enough for now, Harry said. The full repair needs the Wizengamot Charter invoked first. The formal authority. I can't rebuild something this old on my own authority alone, the house protocols require the court to be seated. He looked at Hermione. Which is another reason the petition needs to be filed by end of this week. Already drafted, she said, without looking up. Neville had completed his perimeter, visible to Harry's awareness as a layer of living intention woven into the hillside's own magical field, subtle enough to be missed by anyone not specifically looking for it, strong enough to make ritual work here feel wrong in the specific way that the land itself objects. It wasn't a wall. It was more like the hillside had developed a preference, and the preference was against desecration. That's genuinely extraordinary work, Harry told him. Neville looked at the perimeter with the critical eye of a craftsman checking his joints. The eastern side needs reinforcing. The ground's softer there, the field's thinner. He pulled a small flask from his robe pocket, one of the botanical specimens from the Peverell vault, a living thing in solution, and walked the eastern edge, adding it to the ground in drops with the precision of someone who knows exactly what he's applying and why. Ron, who had spent the last 20 minutes on the ridge with his wand keeping watch and his eyes on the horizon, came back down the slope. "We need to go," he said. "There's weather coming in from the north and I don't think it's natural weather." Harry looked north. The cloud front was moving against the wind, which confirmed Ron's instinct. "Yes," he said. "We're done here." They portkeyed back to Hogsmeade with the October hillside still in their clothes, the cold and the damp and the smell of Welsh countryside, and walked up to the castle in the early afternoon grey. Harry knew something was different in the castle before they crossed the drawbridge. Not danger, nothing sharp or alarmed. Something structural. The castle's magic against his awareness had shifted in the 3 days since he'd last noticed it properly, a change in the texture of it, like a room where furniture has been moved. He stopped in the courtyard and put his hand against the outer wall. "What?" Hermione asked. "Something's been opened," he said. Or, he concentrated. "Something's been accessed, that hasn't been accessed in a very long time." "The King's Chamber," Luna said. Harry looked at her. "The castle has one," she said, with the serene certainty of someone reporting established fact. "Beneath the foundations, below the dungeons. Built with the school, locked for 200 years. Dad has a monograph about it. Well, he wrote a monograph about it. The Quibbler published it in 1997, it got rather negative letters." She paused. "The letters were from people who didn't want it discussed. Which Dad always says is the strongest evidence that something is real." "You didn't mention this before," Hermione said. "You didn't ask about chambers," Luna said reasonably. "How did you know Harry would?" Hermione stopped. Looked at Luna. "You didn't know. You knew the chamber existed and you knew Harry was the king of magic and you let those two facts sit next to each other and waited." "It's very efficient," Luna agreed. Harry was already moving toward the castle entrance. The entrance to the king's chamber was not, as Harry had half expected, behind a dramatic hidden door or through a complex magical puzzle. It was in the corridor below the dungeons, in a section of the castle that students rarely had reason to visit, cold stone, old torches, the smell of deep foundation. The wall was plain. Unremarkable. Except that Harry could feel it, the specific quality of a door that was also a statement, "You only see this if you should." He stood in front of it and placed the seal ring against the stone. The wall didn't dissolve or swing aside or make any dramatic architectural gesture. It simply became transparent, or rather, the perception of it as a wall became transparent, and through that transparency was a staircase going down. Down was warm. He went first. The others followed without discussion. The staircase was cut from bedrock, older than the school itself, older than the surface above, the stone here worn smooth by centuries of feet that had long since stopped walking it. The torches along the walls lit as Harry passed them, not dramatically, not in sequence, just there and burning, steady and amber, the light of something that had been waiting to be useful. The chamber at the bottom was circular. Its ceiling was high and vaulted in stone that had been carved, not decorated, carved, the difference being that decoration is applied and this had been grown from the structure itself, the stone shaped into something that expressed the underlying principle of the space without adding anything foreign to it. The carving was the 17 house seals, arranged around the vault in the same pattern as the stones in Harry's ring. At the center of the chamber was a table. Not like the one at Potter Hall, that table was for deliberation, for discussion, for the working out of decisions. This table was for the exercise of authority that had already been decided. It was low, circular, with a single seat at its northern axis, and the other positions around it were not chairs but marks in the floor, spaces for standing, Harry understood, because the court that sat here did not sit. They stood. They came in acknowledgement of something they recognized, not in submission to something they feared. At the northern seat, the king's seat, a single object rested on the table's surface. A sword. Not Gryffindor's sword, though the resemblance was there in the crossguard and the grip. This was older. The blade was longer, the steel a different color, somehow darker and lighter simultaneously, the way very old metal looks when it has been cared for without being changed. Along the blade, in the same runic language as the table at Potter Hall, words Harry could read without effort, for what is right, not what is easy. He'd heard that before. In his first year, from a man who'd believed it and sometimes managed to practice it. He didn't touch the sword. He walked to the seat and stood before it and put his hands on the table and looked around the chamber, at the 17 seals, at the torches, at the 4 people who had come down with him and were standing in the curved space and looking up at the vault with the expressions of people encountering something that is genuinely and uncomplicatedly ancient and good. "This is what Dumbledore's been protecting," Harry said. "He didn't know it was here," Hermione said. Then, more carefully, "Or he did know it was here and has been," she stopped. "He sealed the West Tower. He's been guarding the Ravenclaw anchor. But this," she looked at the chamber around her. "If he knew this was here, why didn't he?" "Because it's not his to open," Neville said quietly. He was looking at the king's seat with an expression Harry recognized as the one Neville wore when he was thinking at his best, focused, all the social anxiety burned away by genuine understanding. "This opens for the king. Dumbledore can't open it. Even if he knew it was here, even if he'd found the wall, he couldn't have accessed it." "He did know," Harry said. "He's known for a long time." He looked at the chamber and felt its age and its patience and its absolute lack of demand. It wasn't requiring anything of him, it was simply there, complete in itself, waiting. He just couldn't use it. So he worked around it. He did what he could with the access he had. He said it without bitterness. It was just the shape of things, a good man working with incomplete tools because the right tools required someone who hadn't arrived yet. And everything Dumbledore had built, all the careful scaffolding of the last 6 years, had been maintaining the situation until the right tools became available. Imperfect. Loving. Essentially Dumbledore. "The court needs to be seated here," Harry said. "Not at Potter Hall, here. This is the formal seat. Potter Hall is for the working conversations, the negotiations, the building. This is for the formal invocations." He looked at the seal ring. "When I invoke the Wisengamot Charter, it happens in this chamber. Everyone who needs to be present comes here." "Dumbledore will need to know," Hermione said. "I'm going to tell him tonight," Harry said. "All of it. Including the things he already knows and hasn't told me, because I'd rather have that conversation openly than have it revealed sideways in a crisis." Ron said, "That's going to be some conversation." "Yes," Harry said. "It will." He looked at the sword on the table for a long moment. He didn't touch it. Not yet. There was an order to things, and the order mattered, not because of ceremony, but because some things required the right moment to mean what they were supposed to mean. He turned away from it and led them back up the stairs. Dumbledore was in his office. Of course he was. The headmaster looked up when Harry entered, alone this time, which Hermione had accepted with a single evaluating look and then nodded, understanding without needing it explained that this conversation needed to be without witnesses. Not because Harry was afraid of what might be said. Because Dumbledore needed to be able to be honest without an audience, and that was worth protecting. "You've been to Wales," Dumbledore said. "Yes." "And the anchor?" "Sealed and warded. Not repaired, I'll need the formal court for the full repair. But stabilized." Harry sat. 3 Death Eaters came to check on the ritual site. "I sent them away." Dumbledore looked at him over his half-moon glasses with an expression that was managing to be simultaneously approving and anxious about the approval. "You sent them away." "They left," Harry said. "I gave them a message for Voldemort." "And that message was?" "That the site is under my protection and any further ritual work will be met with the full weight of the ancient house charters." He paused. And I said hello. Dumbledore closed his eyes briefly. He is going to respond. I know. I'm counting on it. Harry folded his hands. I found the king's chamber. The silence that followed was of a very specific quality, not the silence of surprise, but the silence of someone who has been waiting for a conversation to reach a particular point. I wondered when you would, Dumbledore said carefully. You knew it was there. I've known for 30 years. I found the wall my first year as headmaster. I spent a great deal of effort attempting to access what was beyond it. He looked at his hands. I was never able to. The magic is absolute on the point of who may enter. But you knew what it was. I knew what it was, yes. Dumbledore looked up. I knew about the king's chamber, and the severance ritual, and the dormant houses, long before most of this became relevant. I have been studying the question of the king of magic since before you were born, in fact. Harry looked at him steadily. Then you knew I was the candidate. I had strong reason to believe, Dumbledore said. Not certainty. There have been candidates before who were not claimed. The magic is not predictable, and I did not want to build your strategy around a possibility that might not materialize, Harry said. I understand that. He paused. But you also knew about the Horcruxes. And you knew about the prophecy. And you knew about the chamber. And you made a decision, years ago, that the way to protect me, the way to keep me functional until all of this was required, was to give me enough to survive and not enough to be overwhelmed. Dumbledore was very still. You were managing the dose, Harry said. Of what I was allowed to know about myself. You thought too much too soon would break me before I could be useful. I thought, Dumbledore said, and his voice had the specific quality of someone saying the true version rather than the diplomatic version, that you were a child carrying the weight of a war, and that every additional weight had a cost, and that I was responsible for calculating those costs. He paused. I still believe that. I also believe, now, that I was wrong about what you could carry. Not because you are extraordinary, though you are. Because I was measuring your capacity by my own experience of grief and weight and limitation, and you are not me. Harry sat with this. It was the most honest thing Dumbledore had said to him in 6 years, and he let it land properly before responding. The Horcruxes, Harry said. How many? I believe 7 was his intention, Dumbledore said. Possibly 6 created, the 7th being himself, the soul fragment that transferred to you the night your parents died. Harry had known this was coming, the house's accumulated understanding had been moving toward this conclusion like water finding its level, but the specific confirmation still had weight. He felt it. He let himself feel it. Then he set it aside in the way he'd been setting things aside since September 1st, not suppressed, just filed, accessible when needed. So I'm connected to him. Yes. The connection is the source of your scar's pain, of your ability to access his thoughts and emotions. It is also, I suspect, a factor in the claiming. Dumbledore looked at him. The part of his soul in you has been diminishing. Since the claiming. I believe the ancient house authority is incompatible with a fragment of Voldemort's soul. Like fire and ice, Harry said. He could feel it, actually, had been able to feel it since the claiming, a low-grade awareness of something foreign in his own magical signature slowly being consumed by the warmth of the 17 houses, the root house most of all. It's burning out. Not quickly. But it's going. Yes, Dumbledore said. And when it is gone, the connection goes with it, Harry said. And so does whatever protection it was giving him. Dumbledore looked at him with the expression of a man seeing something he'd spent decades working toward take a shape he hadn't predicted. You understood this without being told. The houses have been waiting for this. They understand the severance ritual and its implications better than any living person. Harry looked at the headmaster. I need the remaining Horcrux locations. Everything you know or suspect. Dumbledore opened a drawer in his desk and produced a leather journal, old, worn at the corners, the kind of object that carries its use in its appearance. He set it on the desk between them. "Everything I have gathered," he said. "My complete research. The locations I am certain of, the ones I suspect, and my theories on the ones I cannot find." He paused. "I have been investigating this for 2 years. I had intended to begin sharing it with you this year, in controlled doses, I know," Harry said, and picked up the journal. It was heavy. Dense with Dumbledore's cramped, precise handwriting. "Thank you." Dumbledore looked slightly winded by the absence of an argument. "You're not angry about the timeline?" Harry considered it. "I was angrier yesterday." The chamber helped. He looked at the journal. "You were doing what you thought was right. You were wrong about some of it. We'll do better going forward." He stood. "The formal court convening, I want you present. Not as headmaster. As yourself. As the person who's been carrying this the longest, who knows the most history, and whose counsel I actually value." He looked at Dumbledore. "I'm not sidelining you. I'm asking you to stop managing me and start working with me. There's a significant difference." Dumbledore said, "I'm not certain I know how to do that." "I know," Harry said. "I'll let you know when you get it wrong." Something happened in Dumbledore's face that was absolutely, unmistakably, a smile, not the public one, not the performance of benevolent wisdom, but the private one, the genuine kind, surprised out of him by something that was both painful and welcome. "I expect you will," he said. Harry left with the journal under his arm and the 17 houses warm in his chest and the sword still resting untouched in the chamber below the school, patient as the stone it had been resting in for 2 centuries. He was in the library when Malfoy found him. Not the restricted section, the main library, late evening, the daily traffic having thinned to a handful of dedicated 6th and 7th years. Harry had taken a corner table and opened the Horcrux journal and was reading with the focused speed of someone processing information they need quickly, the House of Merlin's transformation principle working in the background of his thinking, turning raw information into understood structure. Malfoy sat across from him without being invited, which was interesting because Malfoy had never sat across from him anywhere without treating the approach as the opening of a campaign. He set a folded piece of parchment on the table. Harry picked it up and read it. It was a letter. Formal, in the Death Eater internal correspondence style that Harry now recognized from the Peverell House archives. Addressed to Draco Malfoy. Signed with Voldemort's mark, not his name, his mark, the serpent sigil used for direct communications. The letter told Malfoy that his mission had a revised deadline. Not December. The end of October. Harry set the parchment down. He looked at the date. 3 weeks away. "When did this come?" he asked. "This afternoon. While you were in Wales." Malfoy was very controlled. The kind of control that cost something. The 3 who came back from the ruin, he wasn't happy about their report. "I imagine not. He's accelerating the timeline because of you." Malfoy's voice was carefully neutral. "My handler told me to tell him the cabinet work couldn't be rushed without risking the mechanism." He replied. Malfoy touched the letter, "That rushing is now preferable to the alternative." Harry thought quickly. 3 weeks changed the schedule. The Wisingamot petition, the court convening, the Welsh repair, all of it needed to move faster. He looked at Malfoy across the library table. "Does your handler know where you are right now?" "No. A beat. I told them I was in the common room." "How much does your handler know about the Potter Hall meeting?" "Nothing. I've told them nothing since then." Malfoy's jaw was tight. "Which is itself a risk. I'm supposed to check in daily." Harry looked at the letter again. October end. 3 weeks. He felt the 17 houses turning over the problem, not panicked, not urgent in the anxious way, but focused, the way a craftsman focuses when a job needs doing faster than planned but not sloppily. The cabinet in the room of requirement, he said. You said you were stalling the repair. Yes. Stop stalling. Fix it. Malfoy stared at him. If I fix it, if you fix it, you tell him it's done, and you name a date for the passage. I'll tell you what date to give him. Harry met his eyes. I need to control when they come through. Not prevent it, control it. If they try to breach the castle on a timeline I don't control, it's a crisis. If they breach it on a timeline I set, it's a trap. Malfoy was quiet for a long moment, reading Harry's face with the intensity of someone checking a calculation. You want them to come through. I want them to come through when I'm ready for them, Harry said. There's a difference. You're 16, Malfoy said. Again. But this time it wasn't contempt, it was the bafflement of someone whose frame of reference keeps failing to apply. You should probably stop noting that, Harry said. It's not changing anything. Malfoy looked at the table. At the Horcrux journal open in front of Harry, he could see from his angle that it was Dumbledore's handwriting, and something shifted in his expression. He gave you that? Tonight. He's been compiling that for years. He almost never lets it out of his. Malfoy stopped. He trusts you. He's learning to, Harry said. So can you. Another long silence. In the library around them, a third year turned a page too loudly and was shushed by someone 2 tables over. Normal. Ordinary. A school evening in the way school evenings are supposed to be. Malfoy picked up the letter and folded it back into his robe. He said, the date you want me to give him. November the 2nd, Harry said. He'd chosen it in the 22nd since he'd conceived the plan, and the 17 houses had confirmed it in the particular way they confirm things, not with certainty about outcome but with recognition of rightness. That's 12 days after your deadline. You tell him the final adjustment took longer than expected. He'll accept that, he'll be irritated, but he'll accept it. He wants the passage more than he wants to punish you for delay. And what will you do with 12 days? Fix everything else, Harry said. Malfoy looked at him, and the expression on his face was one Harry didn't have a name for, too complicated for a single word, shaped from equal parts disbelief and something that was closer to hope than Draco Malfoy had probably allowed himself in a long time. Fix everything else, Malfoy repeated. Yes. Malfoy stood. He said, if this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does. Harry looked up at him steadily. Then I'll have been wrong about something for the first time, he said, and we'll adapt. Malfoy made a sound that was not quite a laugh. He walked away through the library stacks without looking back, and Harry watched him go, and then turned back to the Horcrux journal. He read until midnight, when Madame Pants made her final sweep of the library with the specific energy of someone for whom closing time is a moral position. He packed the journal carefully into his bag and walked through the nearly empty school. The castle was quieter at this hour, not silent, never silent, the magical building always had its own frequency of presence, the hum of wards and decades of work charms and the simple aliveness of stone that had housed magic long enough to absorb some of it. He moved through it with his hand occasionally touching the walls the way he had since the first night, feeling the pulse of it. Neville caught up to him on the 5th floor. Couldn't sleep, Neville said, which wasn't an explanation for being on the 5th floor fully dressed at midnight. More actions request aborted. Write the next chapter now. Chapter 5, Blood on the Chessboard. Neville said, couldn't sleep, which wasn't an explanation for being on the 5th floor fully dressed at midnight, but Harry didn't push it. He'd learned, in the years since he'd started paying proper attention to people rather than just events, that Neville's silences were usually working towards something. You just had to give them room. They walked together, the castle quiet around them, their footsteps soft on the stone. My Gran wrote back, Neville said, after 2 full corridors. And? She's coming to the court convening. He paused. She also wrote 3 paragraphs about your posture based entirely on the photographs in the Prophet. Apparently you've been hunching. Everyone keeps telling me I look different. She's telling you you'll look different wrong if you hunch, Neville said. Different things. He was quiet again for a moment. She also said, she said that she knew your parents. Not well, but she knew them. She said your father had the same quality you apparently have now. That thing where a room reconfigures around you when you walk in. Harry felt that land somewhere complicated in his chest. He didn't say anything about it. She wasn't complimenting your dad, specifically, Neville continued. She was saying she recognized what it meant. What the quality is. She said it's the thing that genuine leaders have, the ones who don't chase authority but just embody it. She said she'd seen it 3 times in her life before you. He looked sideways at Harry. She counted Dumbledore as one of the 3. I'll take that company, Harry said. She'll pretend to be difficult about seating arrangements at the formal court and then be absolutely first through the door, Neville said. Just so you know. Harry smiled at that, genuinely, the kind that reaches the eyes. I'm counting on it. They stopped at the intersection where the corridor branched toward Gryffindor Tower and toward the staircase that led eventually down to the King's Chamber. Neville looked in both directions in the way of someone deciding something. Can I see it? He asked. The chamber. I haven't. You came back and then there was Wales and then Dumbledore and I haven't asked because there's always something. But I'd like to see it. Yeah, Harry said. Come on. Neville stood in the King's Chamber for a long time without speaking. He looked at the vault with the 17 seals. He looked at the marks in the floor, the standing positions for the court. He looked at the sword on the table at the northern seat, and his face did the thing where he processed something large with his entire body, his breathing slowing, his shoulders changing. My parents stood in places like this, he said finally. Not here specifically. But in rooms where things that mattered were being decided. They chose the side they chose and paid for it in the worst way. He looked at the sword. I used to think about that as a tragedy. The waste of it. The pointlessness. He turned to Harry. I don't think about it that way anymore. What do you think about it now? I think they were doing this, Neville said. Building toward something. Not knowing if it would work, not having the authority or the structure that you have now, but doing the same essential thing, trying to restore something that was being destroyed. He paused. I think if my mum could see this room, she'd be glad. Harry looked at his friend, at the person Neville Longbottom had become, the boy who had been terrified of Snape and now walked through the world like someone who had decided very specifically what he was for, and felt the House of Merlin warm in his chest, the principle of transformation, the truth that genuine mastery requires the master to be changed by what they master. When this is done, Harry said, and it will be done, I want you at the formal court. Permanently. Not as a courtesy seat. As the appointed warden of living magic. There's a formal position in the house structure, I looked it up in the vault texts. The King's Court has always had a warden, someone who understands the relationship between magic and the natural world, who guards the living aspects of the ancient working. He looked at Neville. It's yours if you want it. Neville looked at the floor for a moment. When he looked up, his jaw was set in the specific way it had been set in the Department of Mysteries, on the night everything had cost everything. Yes, he said. Obviously yes. They stood in the chamber for a while longer, the torches burning amber, the vault above them patient and complete. Then they went back to Gryffindor Tower and slept. The week that followed moved at a pace that had its own internal logic, not frantic but dense, every day containing more than it should have, each evening different from the last. Harry moved through it with the clarity that had settled in him since the claiming, making decisions with the speed of someone who has stopped second-guessing their own judgment and found, to their surprise, that the judgment holds. The Wisingamot petition was filed on Monday. Hermione had drafted it over the weekend with the assistance of Amelia Bones, who had provided both the legal framework and several extremely pointed amendments that were clearly the product of years of stored frustration with ministry procedure. The petition was 3 inches of dense parchment, formally headed with the 17 house seals, invoking the founding charter language that hadn't been used in 2 centuries, and demanding the convening of the ancient court within 14 days. Fudge's response arrived by Tuesday morning. It was an owl, 3 owls, actually, each carrying a different draft of what was clearly a letter that had gone through significant revision, the earlier drafts apparently having been sent in error by someone in the minister's office who was having a very bad morning. The final version said, in the careful language of someone who had been advised by counsel that the legal ground was not in his favor, that the minister noted the petition and reserved the right to address the matter at the appropriate juncture, which Amelia Bones translated, when Harry showed it to her, as, "He knows he can't block it and he's angry about it." "Good," Harry said. "He'll try to delay," Bones said. "He doesn't have a legal mechanism to do so, but he'll try bureaucratic ones. Scheduling conflicts, procedural objections, the founding charter specifies 14 days from petition filing," Harry said. "It doesn't require his agreement on the venue or the calendar. The court convenes in the King's Chamber and the charter date stands regardless." He paused. "What he can do is try to poison the room before the convening. Public statements, profit articles, already happening," Bones said grimly. She produced that morning's profit. The headline was not subtle: Potter's ancient house claim, ministry experts question validity. Below it, in smaller text, a quote attributed to a senior ministry official who asked not to be named: "The concept of a king of magic is a historical curiosity with no standing in modern magical law. Any attempt to invoke defunct charter provisions risks destabilizing the established governance structures that keep the wizarding community safe." Harry read it once and put it down. "Xenophilius Lovegood," he said. "I need a counterpiece in the quibbler. Not a rebuttal, something affirmative. The history of the King's Chamber, the founding charter, what the ancient court represents. Written for people who don't know the history but are capable of understanding it." "Dad's already writing it," Luna said from the other end of the table. She was eating porridge and reading simultaneously. "He started Monday. He says it's his best work since the Rotfong conspiracy piece, and that one won him 3 awards. "What awards?" Ron asked. "He made them himself," Luna said serenely. "But they were very well crafted." Wednesday brought the first real pushback. Harry was coming out of Charms when he found Cornelius Fudge standing in the corridor outside the classroom, flanked by 2 Aurors, wearing the expression of a man who had decided to take a situation back under control and was actively revising his confidence in that decision as he looked at Harry. The corridor was full of students, which Fudge had presumably not anticipated when he positioned himself here for what he probably planned as a private confrontation. Now he had an audience, and the audience was doing what audiences do, going quiet and paying attention and forming judgments. "Mr. Potter," Fudge said. He'd lost weight since last June. His usual puce had faded to something more jaundiced. "A word." "Of course, Minister," Harry said. He stopped at a conversational distance, not the deferential distance of a student who has been called to account, not the aggressive distance of someone spoiling for a fight. Just a conversation. 2 people talking. "This petition business," Fudge said, dropping his voice to something that would have been private if the corridor had been emptier. "I think we should be able to find a sensible resolution without invoking procedures that have been dormant for 2 centuries for very good reason." "What reason would that be?" Harry asked. Fudge blinked. He'd expected, Harry thought, a less direct question. "Well, the established governance structures, the ministry," Harry said. "Which has spent the last year officially denying that Voldemort has returned, while people died." He said it without venom, simply, clearly, with the factual quality of something that is true and is being stated as true. "The established governance structures haven't been governing, Minister. The founding charter exists precisely for situations like the current one, for when the administrative bodies are inadequate to the nature of the threat." Fudge's color was coming back. "Now see here, the petition is legally valid. The charter invocation is legitimate. The 14-day timeline is written into the founding document of the Wisengamot itself, not as a guideline, as a binding procedure. Harry looked at him steadily. I'm not asking for your approval. I'm inviting your participation. The ministry has a role in what comes next, a useful one. I'd like to work with you, Minister. But the court convenes regardless. One of the aurors behind Fudge, a woman in her 30s with the steady eyes of someone who has been watching this exchange and drawing conclusions, was doing a very poor job of hiding that she agreed with Harry. Fudge said, in a lower voice, "You are 16 years old." "People keep mentioning that," Harry said. "It doesn't seem to be changing the legal situation." He went to his next class. Behind him, he heard Fudge say something to the aurors that he didn't catch, and then one of the aurors saying, quietly but clearly, "He's right, sir." About the charter. Thursday night, the room of requirement burned. Not the whole room, not a disaster, not an accident. Harry had asked it to show him the vanishing cabinet, and the room had obliged, the familiar space forming around the enormous wardrobe with its cabinet twin at Borgin and Burke's. He stood before it alone, having come specifically to check something Malfoy had mentioned in a note slipped under the Gryffindor table at breakfast: repairs complete. Cabinet functional. Handler notified. November 2nd confirmed. Harry opened the cabinet, stepped inside, and felt it, the connection to the Borgin and Burke's twin, active and real, a spatial tunnel through the magical world with no wards at either end, a gap in Hogwarts protections that had been made possible by the room's own disregard for normal magical architecture. He stepped back out and thought about what he needed. Not to close it permanently, that would tell Voldemort the plan had failed. Not to damage it, Malfoy had already stalled once and a second failure would cost more than a delay. What he needed was to know it, to understand it the way he now understood old magical workings, to have it as something he could perceive and account for. He pressed his hand against the cabinet's side and let the House of Makers' institutional memory, the forge heat and precision of the house that understood construction and craft, read the mechanism. It wasn't difficult. The cabinet was a genuinely elegant piece of work, actually, which Harry found he could appreciate separate from its purpose. Two objects in sympathetic resonance, a spatial fold maintained by the resonance itself, stable as long as both cabinets remained functional. He understood exactly how many people could pass through it per hour. He understood what the passage felt like from the inside, which would matter when the time came. He understood that the fold had a specific magical signature that he would now always recognize. He left the room of requirement and went back to the common room and added cabinet, fully mapped to the list he'd been keeping, in the margin of the Horcrux journal, in the small neat handwriting he'd developed since September 1st when his mind had become orderly enough to bother. Friday brought a letter from Narcissa Malfoy. Harry read it at breakfast, which made the morning interesting. It was formal, in the style of the old families, every word chosen, no emotional language, the content of it visible only in what was not said. She thanked him for his correspondence of the previous week. She confirmed that she understood the nature of the House Covenant protection and its implications. She noted that she was not unaware of her son's precarious position and expressed, in language so carefully constructed it was almost abstract, something that in a less constrained writer would have been relief. At the bottom, in a postscript in different ink, added later, privately, after the formal draft was done, she had written, "He is braver than anyone gave him credit for being. He always has been. Please do not let that go to waste." Harry folded the letter and put it in his robe pocket and said nothing about it at breakfast. But Hermione, who had seen his expression change when he read the postscript, looked at him with a question she didn't ask. He mouthed, "Later." She nodded, and turned back to her own correspondence. The first Saturday of November was cold in the way that means it. Frost on the grounds, the lake flat and pewter, the forbidden forest darker than usual with the trees down to their bare bones. Harry had been awake since 5, not from anxiety, from the specific alertness of someone who has a deadline and is making sure they're ready for it. He'd spent the night before going through everything with his core group, mapped out in the common room after everyone else had gone to bed, Hermione, Ron, Neville, Luna, and this time Ginny, who had appeared at 11 with a plate of biscuits and the expression of someone who had been patient long enough. "I've been patient long enough," she'd said. "I know," Harry said. "Pull up a chair." She'd been completely briefed within 40 minutes, which was partly her own sharp intelligence and partly the fact that she'd been piecing it together for weeks. She'd asked 6 questions, all of them good, and then sat back and said, "Right. What do you need from me?" "I need you on the Hogwarts perimeter during the November 2nd passage," Harry said. "You're the best instinctive caster in the year, possibly in the school. I need someone who can respond to what they see without needing it pre-planned." Ginny had looked at him with an expression that was pure Ginny, pleased, embarrassed about being pleased, and covering both with practicality. "Done," she said. So the plan was set. November 2nd, 2 days away. Malfoy had confirmed the Death Eater group coming through the cabinet was 9 people, led by someone called Raoul and including a pair of Voldemort's newer recruits who were, according to Malfoy's intelligence, more aggressive than experienced. They were not coming to destroy the school. They were coming for the Ravenclaw anchor in the West Tower, and for one specific target. Dumbledore. Harry had sat with this for a long time. The target made strategic sense. Dumbledore was the anchor's guardian and the most capable magical obstacle between Voldemort and what he needed. Taking him out of the game permanently would accelerate everything. And Harry had sat with it, and turned it over, and felt the 17 houses give him their collective clarity on the subject, and then gone to Dumbledore and told him. Dumbledore had been quiet for a very long time. Then he'd said, "I see. You're not going to be there when they arrive," Harry said. "You're going to be in the King's chamber." "Hiding," Dumbledore said. "Present in the only space in the school that is absolutely impervious to any attack they could bring," Harry said. "Protecting the single most important room in Hogwarts from direct access, because if they can't find the anchor in the tower and they realize there's something deeper, we don't want them finding the chamber." He paused. "This isn't me protecting you out of sentiment. This is the right deployment of your specific capability." Dumbledore had looked at him for a long moment. "You said I needed to stop managing you and start working with you." "Yes. I find that's rather harder when you're the one managing me." "Is it bad management?" Harry asked. Another long pause. "No," Dumbledore said. "It isn't." He sighed. "Very well. The chamber." November 2nd arrived like any other day and nothing like any other day. The sky was white. The grounds were quiet in the particular way grounds are quiet when they know something is coming. Harry went to breakfast and ate well. This wasn't nerves, it was preparation, the body knowing what it needed, and watched his people around the table. Hermione had dark circles and was pretending she didn't. Ron was eating with the focused calm of someone who has been afraid before and knows how to be useful in spite of it. Neville was reading one of the Peverell Vault texts, which was either research or displacement activity and in Neville's case was probably both. Luna was making notes in a small silver book. Ginny caught Harry's eye across the table and raised her eyebrows. "Ready?" He nodded. Madroff's note at breakfast said, "Tonight. After curfew. They know the castle routine. Expect entry around 11. Harry passed this to Hermione under the table without looking at her. She palmed it into her sleeve. He spent the day doing exactly what he would have done on any other day. He went to classes. He answered questions. He ate dinner. He was, to any observer, calm, not the performed calm of someone suppressing panic, but genuinely, substantively calm, because the plan was good and the preparation was thorough, and when you have the authority of 17 ancient houses and the clarity that comes with them, walking into something you've prepared for is not the same thing as walking into the unknown. He told Dumbledore at 7. The headmaster went to the King's chamber with the Horcrux journal, a flask of tea, and the expression of a man who has conceded a point on the merit and intends to do it without complaint. "Stay until I come for you," Harry said. "Don't come out for anything you hear." "And if I hear nothing?" Dumbledore asked. "Which is to say, if things go wrong, Then you're in the safest room in Britain, Harry said. And you'll know what to do from there. Dumbledore looked at him. I have considerable faith in you, he said. I want you to know that. Whatever my errors have suggested to the contrary. I know, Harry said. Close the door. At 10 o'clock Harry was in the room of requirement. Not alone, Ron was at the corridor entrance, Neville at the West Tower staircase, Luna at the junction point near the Ravenclaw common room where any group moving from the room of requirement toward the tower would have to pass. Ginny was mobile, moving between all three positions with the quick efficiency of someone built for exactly this. Hermione was with Harry. They stood in the room that the room had become. It had read what they needed, because rooms of this age and magic understand necessity, and given them a broad open space with good sight lines and the vanishing cabinet at its center. No illusions of a junk shop or repository. Just the cabinet and the room. When the first one comes through, Harry said, not for the first time but saying it again because repetition in this context is not redundancy but confirmation, don't engage immediately. Let me establish contact. Contact, Hermione said. You're going to talk to them. For approximately 30 seconds, Harry said. She looked at him. And then we'll see how they respond. She had her wand out. He didn't, which she'd noticed and decided not to comment on. He'd explain it later, or she'd understand it in the moment, which with Hermione was just as likely. 11 o'clock came and went. At 11:14 the cabinet door opened. The first one through was Raoul, big, confident, moving with the assurance of someone who has been through worse situations than a school at night. He stepped into the room and saw Harry immediately, and the assurance fractured. Then the others came through. 6, 7, 8, 9 total, as advertised, spreading across the room in the automatic response of trained people encountering resistance, wands out, forming a loose arc. Raoul looked at Harry for a long 3 seconds. Potter, he said. Hello, Harry said. You were told about this. His voice was careful, recalibrating. You're alone. No, Harry said. I'm not. But the people with me aren't relevant yet. He looked at the 9 of them with the steady attention he'd given the 3 on the Welsh hillside. The ring on his finger caught the ambient light of the room of requirement and the 17 stones returned it, and the warmth in his chest was present and immense and completely without anxiety. I want to give you the same offer I give everyone. Leave. Carry a message back. Tell him what you encountered here was not something his intelligence prepared him for. Raoul said, there are 9 of us. Yes, Harry said. I can count. You're a child with a. Raoul stopped. He'd just noticed that Harry's wand wasn't in his hand. His eyes went to Harry's empty right hand and back to his face, and the recalibration happened visibly, rapidly, in the specific way of experienced fighters encountering a variable they haven't trained for. One of the newer ones, younger, 20 at most, with the specific combination of fear and aggression that makes inexperienced fighters dangerous, cast without warning. The reductor curse hit the air 2 feet in front of Harry and simply stopped. Not blocked. Not deflected. Absorbed, the way stone absorbs rain, present and then not present, the energy of it dispersing into the room's ambient magical field with a sound like a breath let out. Harry hadn't moved. He hadn't raised a hand or cast a counter. The House Covenants had simply answered. The same way they'd answer if Voldemort moved against Narcissa Malfoy. Not personal defense by Harry's effort. The Covenant's own nature defending their holder. The room went very quiet. That was the only free attempt, Harry said, looking at the young Death Eater who had cast it with the calm attention of someone correcting a misapprehension. I'm not going to tell you that you can't hurt me, because in theory you might find something that gets through. But I want you to understand what you're casting at, so that your decisions here are informed ones. He looked around the arc of 9 faces. I am Lord of 17 ancient houses. I hold the founding covenants of the magical world's oldest governance structure. Raising a wand against me is not assault. It is a violation of covenants older than this country. The consequences are not from me, they're from the magic you're violating. Raoul said, "That's a bluff." "Try again," Harry said simply. 2 of the 9 went for it simultaneously, coordinated, a binding curse from the left and a blasting hex from the right. Both died in the air before they reached him, the same absorption, the same breath-out sound, the same settled absence of impact. Harry looked at Raoul. "I'd like them to leave," he said. "The 7 who haven't cast. They came here under orders and they haven't chosen to assault the covenants. I'll let them go through the cabinet and back to wherever they came from, and they can carry the message." Raoul's jaw was working. He was a practical man, Harry could see, not a believer in Voldemort's ideology in the way the true inner circle were, but a professional, someone who had calculated his allegiance in terms of power and survival. He was currently recalculating. "You," Harry said to the young one who had cast twice, and then to Raoul. "Stay." Raoul looked at him. "Why?" "Because you were the one carrying the actual orders, and I want to read them." Raoul's hand went involuntarily to his robes. "Inner pocket." "Yes," Harry said. "Those." The 7 non-casting Death Eaters looked at Raoul. He made a minute gesture, not defeat, a professional's acknowledgement of changed circumstances, and they filed back through the cabinet, one by one, until only Raoul and the young one remained. Hermione was watching Harry with the expression she reserved for moments when she understood something completely and was still finding it breathtaking. Raoul reached into his inner pocket and withdrew a folded document. He didn't hand it over. He set it on the floor between them, which was a way of giving it without the gesture of submission, and Harry appreciated the precision of that. He walked forward and picked it up. He read it. The orders were detailed. The Ravenclaw anchor, yes, a specific ritual to be performed at the West Tower that would not complete the severance but would damage the anchor past natural repair, removing it from the equation permanently. But below that, in a different hand, if the headmaster is found, use the implement. What implement? Harry asked. Raoul said nothing. Harry looked at him. I'm not going to extract it from you by force or by magic. I'm asking you because you're going to need to make a decision about whose authority you trust right now, and I'd like you to have good information when you make it. He paused. Whatever he's given you, it's gone. This mission is over. You know that. The question is what you do from here. Raoul looked at the floor. Then at Harry. A curse, he said. Tailored. For old men whose magical core is declining. He reached into a different pocket and produced a vial, dark glass, sealed. I was told it's untraceable. Harry looked at the vial. He kept his expression exactly where it was. The 17 houses turned a cold and absolute attention on the small glass bottle and what it meant, what it said about the man who had sent these people, what it said about how far along his planning was, what it said about the fact that Dumbledore's death had been considered and prepared for and bottled. Give it to me, Harry said. Raoul handed it over. No hesitation. Harry looked at it for a moment and then put it in his own pocket. Here's what happens now, he said. You go back through the cabinet. You tell him the mission failed because of variables you weren't briefed on. You don't tell him about the Covenant demonstration, you tell him Potter was there with significant backup and you made a tactical withdrawal. That keeps you alive. And him, Raoul said. He nodded at the young one. Harry looked at the young Death Eater, maybe 19, pale, the cast twice aggression having fully collapsed into something that was just scared. What's your name? A pause. Avery. Related to the Avery who was in Voldemort's first inner circle. Son. Harry thought about not, sitting at the end of the Potter Hall table, alone, deciding to step through the door anyway. He thought about legacies and what you owe to the people who made them and what you owe to yourself. You have options, he told Avery. Different from Knott's, because you've been further in. But options. He looked at the young man. Think about it. He stepped back and let them both reach the cabinet. They went through. The door swung closed. The room was quiet. Hermione let out a long breath. "The vial," she said. "For Dumbledore's knowledge," Harry said. "And Bones. We need to understand the curse." He looked at her. "Send the signal to the others. Stand down, no passage to the tower, no engagement." He was already moving toward the door. "We need to reach the Wisengamot chamber. The formal convening is moving up." We said November, and I said fix everything else and the vial changes the timeline," Harry said. He was already moving to remove Dumbledore. "Which means the severance is closer than even Malfoy knew." He looked at Hermione. "Can Bones convene the court in 3 days?" Hermione was already thinking at speed. "She's had the petition since Monday. The 14-day charter clock is already running. If she invokes the emergency provision in the founding charter, Article 7, convening in crisis conditions, she can call the court in 48 hours. She looked at him. "It'll be contested." "Let them contest it," Harry said. "In front of the court. With everyone present." They came out of the room of requirement into the empty corridor and Harry sent his Patronus, the stag, blazing silver, burning in the dim stone passage, in 3 directions at once, a thing he hadn't consciously worked out how to do but which had happened anyway, naturally. The stag splitting into 3 identical forms and bounding toward Ron's position and Neville's and Luna's with messages that resolved from light into sound as they arrived, all clear. "Come to Gryffindor Tower." Hermione watched the 3 stags disappear around 3 separate corners and said nothing for a moment. "Triple Patronus," she said eventually. "Apparently," Harry said. "That's Hermione." "Right. Tower first." She started walking. "I'm going to note it in my research notes though." "Subsection?" Harry asked. "New chapter," she said. The 5 of them assembled in a common room within 15 minutes, arriving in overlapping succession, Ron first, slightly out of breath, then Neville and Luna together from the tower junction, and Ginny last, appearing at the portrait hole with color in her face and an expression that said she'd been ready for more and was readjusting. Harry gave them the complete account in 8 minutes. The 9 Death Eaters. The Covenant demonstration, Neville's eyes sharpened at that, taking in the implications. The orders, the vial, Raoul's retreat. Avery. "The vial," Neville said. "A tailored curse for Dumbledore," Harry said. He was planning it as backup. If the anchor damage alone wasn't enough to end the war quickly, removing the strongest defensive asset, "That's not the part that worries me," Neville said quietly. Everyone looked at him. He was looking at the fire, working something through. "The part that worries me is the tailored quality. A curse made specifically for one person, accounting for their individual magical signature and physical condition. That's not something you commission quickly." He looked at Harry. "He's been planning Dumbledore's death for months. Which means the severance timeline is months ahead of where we thought." The fire cracked. Outside, the grounds were still and dark and cold. "Malfoy's information was accurate as of when he gave it," Harry said. "But Voldemort doesn't necessarily share his full timeline with the people running his errands. He's compartmentalized," Hermione said. "Malfoy knows the cabinet mission. He doesn't know the full ritual schedule." She looked at the fire. "We need the Welsh anchor repaired faster than we planned. Before the formal convening if possible," Harry said. "If the court is seated and the charter is invoked with the anchor still damaged, the formal working is going to have a gap in it." "Can you repair it without the court being seated?" Ron asked. "Technically, no. The full repair requires the formal authority." He paused. "But I can do something tonight that I couldn't have done a week ago." He looked at Neville. "The ward you built, is it holding?" "As of this morning," Neville said. "I've been checking it remotely. It's intact. Then the anchor is protected against further damage." He can't complete additional ritual marks while the ward is active. Harry thought for a moment. Which means the Welsh site is stable but not restored, and the Hogwarts anchor, the West Tower, is the more urgent variable. He looked at the ring on his finger. Tomorrow. I need to go to the West Tower and look at what Dumbledore's built there. He'll want to come, Hermione said. He can, Harry said. He should, actually. His ward work is excellent. I want to understand it before I add anything to it. Ron had been quiet for a few minutes, which for Ron meant he was sitting on something. The young one, he said. Avery. Yes. You told him he had options. He does, Harry said. He cast at you twice, Ron said. Not accusingly, thinking. He did. And I told him to think about his options anyway. Harry looked at Ron. He's 19 and his father is an inner circle Death Eater and he's been pointed at a target and told to fire, probably since before he left school. He's not, he doesn't have Not's freedom of movement or Not's relative safety. But the offer stands. Ron was quiet for another moment. You're going to end up with a very strange collection of people in your corner, he said finally. Look at this room, Harry said. Ron looked at the room, at Hermione with her notebook open on her knee, at Neville still looking at the fire with the focused gravity of his best thinking, at Luna who had fallen asleep in the armchair with the quibbler over her face, at Ginny sitting cross-legged on the floor with her wand turning in her fingers the way it did when she was thinking hard. He looked back at Harry with the wide warm grin. Fair point, he said. The West Tower the next morning was revealed, by Dumbledore's patient explanation, to be a masterpiece of misdirection. The ward work he'd laid over 15 years was not, as Harry had expected, a shield. It was a perceptual barrier, an enormously complex working that made anyone who wasn't Dumbledore or specifically keyed to the wards experience the tower as simply unremarkable, a storage space for disused equipment, nothing worth investigating. Harry stood in the actual space with Dumbledore beside him and his hand against the wall and felt the Ravenclaw anchor, clean and strong, undamaged, the note in the house cord ringing clear, and felt also the quality of Dumbledore's ward work, the intellectual precision of it, the sheer disciplined intelligence it represented. 30 seconds of being with the charm tells you more about the caster than 30 years of conversation, Harry said. Dumbledore looked sideways at him. That is a founder's principle, he said. From the Ravenclaw tradition specifically. How did you, House of Ravenclaw, Harry said. The institutional memory includes principles. Something moved in Dumbledore's face that was simply wonder. Genuine, unguarded, the expression of a man whose capacity to be surprised has not been depleted by age. Of course it does, he said softly. Harry added his authority to the ward work, not replacing Dumbledore's layers, adding beneath them, the way the root house worked, grounding. He felt the anchor respond, felt it recognize the king of magic's formal attention, felt its signature strengthen and stabilize. When he stepped back, the tower felt different. Not visually. In its weight. In the conviction of its own protection. Dumbledore was looking at the wall with the expression Harry had come to associate with the headmaster at his most honest, open, a little tired, touched by something he hadn't expected. I've been protecting this alone for a very long time, he said. It is, he stopped. Considerably better with help. Yes, Harry said. It is. They went back down the tower stairs, and the school moved around them in its ordinary morning way, students and noise and the smell of breakfast still faintly in the air, and Harry felt the king's chamber far below them in the deep foundations like a heartbeat, steady and patient, waiting for what came next. The letter from Avery came that evening. It was short, and signed, written in a hand that had been trying to disguise itself and hadn't quite managed it. It said only, if the offer is real, I need it before the 15th. After that I won't have the freedom to take it. Harry wrote back immediately, it's real. Use the name Corvus at the Leaky Cauldron on the 9th and ask for Amelia Bones. He sent it with Hedwig, who departed with the efficiency of a bird who understands important correspondence and carries it accordingly. Then he sat at his desk in the dormitory with Dumbledore's Horcrux journal open, and the 17 houses warm in his chest, and the November dark outside the window, and he looked at the list he'd been keeping, the plan, the timeline, the moving pieces, and marked off what was done and looked at what remained. The court, 3 days away. The Welsh anchor, awaiting restoration. 6 Horcruxes accounted for, their locations mapped by Dumbledore's careful years of work, their destruction requiring specific methods that the House of Peverell's memory was beginning to clarify. And the fragment of Voldemort's soul in his own chest, burning slowly out in the warmth of 17 ancient houses, diminishing day by day with the steady patience of something the magic had known how to do all along. He wrote Avery, arranged on his list and closed the journal. From the next bed, Ron's voice in the dark, "You're still up?" "Yes." "Is everything?" "Yes," Harry said. "Go back to sleep." A pause. "Harry." "Yeah. You know what you're doing, right? I mean, genuinely. I'm not asking because I doubt you. I'm asking because I want to hear you say it." Harry looked at the dark ceiling of the dormitory, the ordinary dark of a school bedroom, beds and breathing and the particular comfort of a shared space, and felt the 17 houses, and the sword untouched in the chamber below, and the warmth of the root house that was simply ground, simply present, simply there. "Yes," he said. "I know what I'm doing." Ron let out a breath. "Good," he said. "Just checking." The dormitory was quiet. Outside, November wind moved through the grounds, and the castle held them all with its enormous patient warmth, and somewhere in the deep foundations the king's chamber waited, and the sword rested on the table at the northern seat, and everything that needed to happen was 12 days closer to happening. Harry closed his eyes. He slept. Chapter 6, The First Dawn of a New Age. The king's chamber had never held this many people. Harry knew this the way he knew everything the houses gave him, factually, precisely, with the quiet authority of something that had been true for a long time and was simply being acknowledged. The chamber had been built for this, designed for exactly this density of gathered magical authority, but it had never been used. 2 centuries of designed purpose, waiting. He stood at the northern axis before the table with the sword on it and watched them arrive. They came down the staircase in 1s and 2s, the torches lighting as they descended, the vault above revealing itself in its full carved detail as eyes adjusted to the amber light, 17 seals arranged in the pattern of the ring stones, the standing positions marked in the floor, the circular table at the center with its single seat. Each person who entered the chamber went still for a moment. Not from ceremony or instruction. Just from the quality of the space itself, the weight of what it was. Augusta Longbottom arrived exactly as Neville had predicted, first, despite having given every indication of being last, in her best robes with the vulture hat, moving at the speed of someone who has been waiting for this room their entire life and will not be beaten to it. She looked at the vault, at the seals, at the sword, and her chin came up with the specific angle of someone who has had their most important conviction confirmed. She found her standing position without being told which it was. Amelia Bones came in behind her, already in motion, the organized efficiency of someone who had spent the last 3 days working without sleeping enough and who was running on the particular fuel of purpose. She had a document case under her arm and the expression of someone who has assembled every legal instrument she needs and is ready to use all of them. Griselda Marchbanks descended the stair with the speed of a woman who had decided at 93 that moving slowly was a waste of what time remained, and took her position with the straight back of someone who had witnessed major magical events before and knew how to stand in them. The family heads from Potter Hall, Greengrass, Zabini, Abbott, the Bones cousins, the others who had answered the invitation and sat at the rune-marked table and made their decisions in the amber afternoon light. Thaddeus Knott, who came alone again and stood at his position with the careful stillness of someone who has committed to a course and is not going to look like he's second-guessing it. Xenophilius Lovegood arrived in turquoise robes with his satchel and his notebook and his particular energy of a man attending an event he has been writing about for years and finding it exactly as he imagined it, then immediately noticing 3 things he hadn't imagined and making notes about those. Luna stood to the left of the northern axis, in the position Harry had designated for her, in her usual clothes with her spectrospecs pushed up on her forehead and the silver compass in her hands. She looked at the vault above and smiled. Neville stood to Harry's right, in the warden's position, with the quiet settled gravity of someone who has understood what they are for and is standing in it. Ron was against the wall to the south, not a formal court position. He wasn't part of the old house structure in the ceremonial sense, but Harry had said I need you here and Ron was here, arms crossed, watching the room with the focused attention of someone doing the most important job of simply bearing witness. Ginny was at the staircase. Hermione was beside Harry. Dumbledore stood at the eastern axis, in the position of the Keeper, the historical counterpart to the King in the chamber's design, which Harry had explained to him 3 days ago and which Dumbledore had received with the expression of someone being handed a truth they'd been adjacent to for decades without quite grasping its full shape. He was not in headmaster robes. He was in something older, something that Harry recognized from the Potter Hall archives as ceremonial wizard dress of 3 centuries past, deep blue, unadorned, worn with the simplicity of someone setting aside the persona and standing as the person. When everyone was in position, the chamber was full in the way the design had always intended, the standing court, the king at the northern axis, the keeper at the east, the warden to the right, the seer to the left, and the full assembly ranged around the circular table in the positions marked in the ancient stone floor. Harry looked at them. 17 people in the positions designated for 17 distinct magical principles. The 17 stones in his ring were warm. The chord of the houses was full and resonant, every note present and clear, and underneath all of them the root house, the unnamed one, simply ground. He said, I convene this court. The torches brightened. Not dramatically, incrementally, steadily, the way dawn brightens rather than the way a lamp is switched on. The carved seals in the vault above caught the increased light and returned it multiplied, each seal illuminated in the color corresponding to its house, 17 colors mingling overhead in something that was simultaneously ancient and immediate. And in the foundation stones beneath their feet, Harry felt the chamber answer, felt the 200-year dormancy end, not with a surge or an explosion but with the quiet inevitability of something that was always going to happen reaching the moment when it happened. Like a key turning in a well-made lock. The specific rightness of it. Amelia Bones said, her voice carrying clearly in the chamber's perfect acoustics, the ancient charter of the Wizengamot is hereby invoked, under Article 1, in the name of the 17 founding houses, by the authority of the confirmed King of Magic. The formal court of the ancient houses is seated. All proceedings here carry the full legal and magical weight of the founding covenants. Let this be witnessed and recorded. She opened her document case and the recording quill she placed on the table's edge began to move, writing in the compact formal hand of official minutes. The charter was invoked. The court was real. What followed next was 3 hours of the most consequential work Harry had ever done, and almost none of it looked like what people expected when they imagined the King of Magic at the center of an ancient court. It looked like Amelia Bones presenting legal documents and Harry signing them. It looked like Griselda Marchbanks raising procedural questions with the precision of someone who had spent 70 years in magical governance and was now applying all of that experience to a structure 700 years older than the modern Wizengamot. It looked like Thaddeus not standing at his position with his jaw set while Harry formally extended the house covenant protection to every family represented in the chamber, binding them into the court structure, not conscription, each extension offered and accepted, each acceptance recorded. It looked like Dumbledore and Harry exchanging information at the eastern and northern axes, the Keeper and the King, 2 voices of different registers finding a working frequency, and the room watching them find it. It looked like Neville presenting, from the warden's position, a formal assessment of the state of each anchor point, the Hogwarts Tower, stable and reinforced, the Welsh Ruin, protected and awaiting formal repair, the other 5 locations that Voldemort had identified as targets, each mapped, each assessed. The warden's report delivered with the composed precision of someone who had been doing this work without the formal title for weeks and was now simply speaking from a recognized position. It looked like Luna reading from the silver compass, her voice carrying in the chamber with a quality it didn't always have, clearer, more precise, the seer's tradition the House of Seers had held for 7 centuries, speaking through the instrument and through her with a naturalness that made the hair on several attendees' arms rise. What she read was the state of the ritual working in the world outside this chamber, the location of Voldemort's progress, the current status of the severance ritual, the distance between now and disaster. "He's aware the court has convened," Luna said, looking up from the compass. He felt it. The invocation, it reached him. She paused. "He's afraid. Not of Harry specifically. Of this." She gestured at the chamber, at the assembled court. "He understands what it means. He's known what it means for decades. It's why he's been working toward the severance." Her voice was matter-of-fact, informational. "He'll move faster now. The ritual, he can't wait for the cabinet passage anymore. He'll try to reach one of the anchor points directly." Harry looked at Neville. "The Welsh site. The ward will hold," Neville said. "But not under direct assault. If he sends significant force, he'll come himself," Hermione said from Harry's left. She'd been cross-referencing documents and the Horcrux journal throughout the proceedings, the recording quills scratching a companion to her own. "He won't send people for something this important. Not after the cabinet mission failed, not after the court convened. This is too far outside his plan for him to trust it to anyone else." The chamber was quiet for a moment, everyone absorbing the implications. Harry said, "Then we go to Wales." Augusta Longbottom said, "Immediately, when?" "Today," Harry said. "The court stays seated, legally, the invocation holds for 30 days once made. The formal repair of the Welsh anchor is court business, which means it happens under the Charter Authority." He looked at Bones. "The emergency enforcement powers. Are they in the record?" "Signed and witnessed 20 minutes ago," she said. "Amelia." He held her gaze. "The Death Eater Network. The intelligence Malfoy has provided, the Avery contact, the movement intelligence from the Welsh site over the last 2 weeks, is that enough for the Auror operations?" She said, "More than enough. I have been building these cases for 2 years. I've been waiting for the legal authority to act without ministry obstruction." She paused. "I have it now." "Then activate it," he said. "All of it. Today. While Voldemort's attention is on us in Wales." She had her wand out before he'd finished the sentence. They left within the hour. The court remained seated in the chamber in the legal sense, its authority persisting, its record being maintained by Bones' self-sustaining quill, while the physical participants dispersed to their various urgent purposes. Bones to the ministry, flanked by the 2 Aurors she trusted absolutely and with a stack of warrants that represented, Harry imagined, a very significant release of pressure after years of building. Marchbanks to the Wisengamot chamber, to be present when the formal notification of the court's convening arrived and to manage whatever reaction Fudge produced. Augusta Longbottom, to Harry's genuine surprise, announced that she was going to Wales. "Augusta," Dumbledore began. "Albus," she said, in the tone of a woman who had known him for 40 years and had been waiting 40 years to use that particular tone. "My grandson is the Warden of Living Magic. I am not going to be at home drinking tea while he goes to repair an ancient anchor." She looked at Harry. "Besides, I know the Welsh runic tradition better than anyone alive under 80. You'll want me there." Harry looked at her. He said, "Welcome to the field." Her chin came up with the vulture hat at its most impressive angle. "Obviously," she said. Wales the second time was different from the first. The sky was the same, low, grey, the hills in their October nakedness, the Brecon beacons spread below the site in the wide indifferent way of landscape that has watched human events for millennia and will watch them long after. But the site itself felt different, and Harry felt the difference before he'd crossed the forecourt distance to the foundation stone. Neville's ward was intact and strong, the living intention woven into the hillside's own field, subtle and deep. But underneath it, in the foundation stone itself, something had changed since their first visit. The anchor's damage was more severe. He reached it, Harry said. Not physically, remotely. He's been working at it from a distance. He looked at the stone. When did this happen? Last 2 days, Neville said, crouching to read the ground. The ward held the external attack but the damage that was already in the stone. He pressed his palm flat to the earth. It's been spreading from inside. Like a crack in a wall that you seal the surface of but not the root, Harry said. Yes. Harry looked at the stone for a moment, understanding the full picture, the damage that had been there from August, sealed by the glyphs he'd neutralized in their first visit, but not repaired. The anchor's core integrity compromised, the crack running deeper than the surface working, and Voldemort at a distance with weeks of work pulling at it, patient and precise. He sat down on the cold ground in front of the foundation stone. Cross-legged, both hands on the stone, ring flat against the ancient rock. This was going to take as long as it took, and it was going to take everything he had. Hermione understood immediately. She positioned herself at his right shoulder, not touching him, simply present and attentive, her wand out to manage anything external. Neville moved to the perimeter to reinforce the ward. Augusta Longbottom crouched beside Harry and looked at the foundation stone with sharp eyes and said, "What do you need from me?" "The runic restoration sequence," Harry said. "The Welsh tradition for anchor work. I can see what needs doing but I've never done it in this specific tradition before. Talk me through the outer layer while I do the inner work." She looked at him. "You're going to attempt the inner work directly? The core repair?" "Yes. She stopped. "That requires the king's authority at full invocation. It requires the court to be formally engaged, not just seated." "I know," Harry said. "I'm going to reach back to the chamber." Augusta Longbottom looked at him for a long 3 seconds with the evaluating eyes that had seen a great deal in her long life. Then she nodded. "I'll guide the outer layer," she said. "You do the inner work. Don't lose yourself in it." "I won't." "People say that," she said. "They lose themselves anyway." "The deep anchor work," she paused. "Your father would have been able to do this. Your grandfather too. But even they never had 17 houses behind them when they tried." She put her hand briefly on his shoulder. 1 second. Then she moved to the stone's edge and began to read the runes aloud, the old Welsh tradition, the specific cadence that was as much incantation as description. Harry closed his eyes and reached back. Not metaphorically, the king's chamber was 200 miles away and full of people who were part of the seated court, and the anchor work required that authority formally engaged, which meant he needed the court to be present here in the only way that mattered, which was magically. He reached through the covenant structure, through the bonds that the invocation had created between the chamber and the court's members, and pulled. He felt them answer. Not all of them physically, this wasn't a vision or an out-of-body experience, nothing that dramatic. The court's authority existed in the magical layer of the world, and that layer didn't have the same distance limitations as the physical one. He felt Bones' signature from the Ministry and Marchbank's from the Wisengamot chamber and Dumbledore's from somewhere that was moving. He'd taken the portkey separately and was close. Harry realized, he was at the base of the hill. He felt the 17 houses. All of them, fully present, the complete cord, and underneath it the root house, the unnamed one, simply ground. He opened his hand against the foundation stone and said, inside the working, to the damaged anchor, "I see you. I know what you are. I know what you hold." The anchor knew him back. Even damaged, even with the crack running through its core, it recognized the authority of the King of Magic the way the other anchor had recognized it, the way the cabinet had responded to the seal ring, the way the castle doors had opened before he reached them. There was no uncertainty in the recognition. Ancient things know what they know without doubt. He reached into the crack. Not gently, not because he was being careless, but because gentleness wasn't the tool for this. The crack had been made by deliberate, forceful, targeted magic, and patching it with a gentle touch would produce a patched result. What it needed was restoration, not repair. The difference between mending a break in a bone and growing a new one in the same shape. He pushed the full authority of the court through the connection and into the damage. He felt it resist, not the anchor resisting, the damage itself, the corrupted working Voldemort had embedded in the stone over months of remote assault. It had structure, intention, a will that was not sentient but was magically persistent, designed to widen rather than close. Like an infection that fights the immune response. Harry felt the House of Merlin's principle turn in his chest, transformation, the change that genuine mastery requires, and understood that the right approach to this resistance was not to push harder. The house wasn't teaching him to be stronger. It was teaching him to change his approach. The resistance expected force because it had been built in response to force. The way to dissolve it was not to add to the force. It was to change what the force was. He shifted the invocation's quality. Instead of authority pressing into damage, he offered recognition. The acknowledgement that the principle the anchor held was still present, still complete, still itself beneath the damage. He wasn't repairing a broken thing. He was reminding an intact thing of its own wholeness. The resistance dissolved. Cleanly. Completely. With the specific sound that the Covenant demonstrations in the Room of Requirement had made, a breath let out. Present and then not present. The crack closed. Not dramatically. Not with light or sound or any of the theatrical indicators of significant magic in stories. The stone beneath his hands was simply, whole. Complete in itself. Resonant at the frequency it had always been designed to resonate at, the note in the house chord ringing true and clear for the first time since August. Harry opened his eyes. Augusta Longbottom was sitting back on her heels, the runic sequence completed, looking at the foundation stone with the expression of someone who has just seen something they will be describing for the rest of their long and story-rich life. Done, she said quietly. Done, Harry confirmed. His hands were shaking slightly. Not from magical depletion, the 17 houses were not a reservoir that emptied, they were something more structural than that. The shaking was physical. He'd been sitting still on cold ground for 40 minutes and his body had opinions about that. Hermione handed him a flask of hot tea without comment. He took it and drank and felt the warmth go through him and said, "Thank you." "Neville's ward held throughout," she said. "Nothing got through." "He'll know it's repaired," Harry said. He wasn't alarmed. He was stating the reality of the situation, the same way you state the weather. The anchor going from damage to whole is something he'll feel, the way I felt the damage when I arrived. He'll know we've done it. And he'll come, she said. Yes. How long? Minutes, Harry said. Maybe less. And then he felt it, the specific attention he'd been aware of in flashes since September, the connection to Voldemort through the diminishing soul fragment in his chest, now barely a thread but still present, and through it the quality of Voldemort's focus in that moment, white-hot, precise, and moving. Coming here. Harry stood. Dumbledore crested the hill from the south at the same moment, moving faster than Harry had seen him move, not running, but with the purposeful speed of someone who had been watching the working from a distance and had timed his arrival. He came to stand beside Harry and looked at the foundation stone, at its wholeness, and something moved through his face. It's done, Harry said. I know. I felt it from the path. Dumbledore stood beside him and looked at the horizon to the east. He's coming. Yes. Do you know what you're going to do? Yes. Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. Will you tell me? No, Harry said. Because I need you to respond to what you see rather than what you're prepared for. What you know how to do is respond to the moment. Don't pre-plan this one. He looked at the old man. Trust yourself. Dumbledore looked at him. That's precisely what you've been asking me to do for all of this. Apparently it needs repeating, Harry said. Something cracked in the air 50 meters up the hillside, the specific crack of a portkey arrival at speed, the kind made by someone traveling without the gentle deceleration of ministry-regulated transport, moving fast and not caring about the landing. Voldemort arrived on the hillside of House Merlin's seat in the way he arrived everywhere, with absolute presence, the specific quality of a person for whom the surrounding world has always been primarily a surface on which to inscribe their own existence. He was robed in black, wandless in his right hand. Actually that was wrong, his wand was already drawn, it had been drawn in the moment of arrival, and he was scanning the site with the red eyes that Harry had been looking into since he was a year old. They found Harry. The connection between them, the soul fragment's thread, flared and died. Gone. In the 3 seconds since Voldemort had arrived on the hillside, the last of the fragment had consumed itself in the warmth of the 17 houses, burning out with the finality of an ember going cold. Harry felt it go and felt, in its absence, a clarity that was different from the clarity he'd had since September 1st. That clarity had been like a window thrown open. This was like a door removed from its frame entirely. The connection was gone. Voldemort felt it too. Harry saw it in the red eyes, a fractional change, the specific flicker of a man who has just lost a tool he didn't know he was relying on. For 1 second, Tom Riddle was recalibrating. Recalculating. Finding that his map of Harry Potter no longer corresponded to the territory. Tom, Harry said. The name landed in the October air between them. Voldemort's eyes narrowed. He'd always hated the name and Harry had always known it, and the knowing had always felt like a small act of resistance. Now it felt like something more precise than that, a statement of understanding. Not contempt. Recognition. I know what you are beneath the persona you've built. I know the history of it. I know what it cost. You've invoked the court, Voldemort said. His voice was the voice Harry knew from every nightmare of the last 6 years, cold, measured, carrying the specific quality of a person who has decided that effect is a weakness and excised it. But underneath it, not quite suppressed, the recalibration. The adjustment. I felt it. Yes, Harry said. You think that changes something. It has already changed everything, Harry said. The court is seated. The covenants are active. The Welsh anchor is restored. The Hogwarts anchor is secured. The severance ritual cannot be completed. He held Voldemort's gaze. The architecture of what you've been building for decades has lost its foundation. You can try to rebuild it, but the King of Magic's court is now in active session and the charter authority supersedes anything you attempt by an order of magnitude. Voldemort looked at him. The red eyes moved, to the ring, to the foundation stone, to the restored anchor's quality in the air, to Dumbledore standing to Harry's right, to Neville and Hermione and Augusta Longbottom ranged across the hillside. He was reading the situation the way he always had, with the brilliant tactical intelligence that had always made him genuinely dangerous, and he was finding something he hadn't been prepared to find. You are 16 years old, he said. Different from everyone else who had said it. Not bafflement or challenge. Something almost clinical. You've been saying something like that for 16 years, Harry said. In various forms. That I shouldn't be what I am. That my existence is an error. That whatever I represent is a mistake that needs correcting. He paused. You've always been wrong about that. I destroyed you once, Voldemort said. You destroyed a fragment of your own soul, Harry said, that had been living in me. The rebound killed you too, which makes the scorecard somewhat less impressive than you're implying. Something moved through the red eyes. Not amusement, Voldemort didn't do amusement. But recognition. The specific recognition of one brilliant mind encountering another that isn't going to be managed. He raised his wand. Harry still hadn't raised his. The curse was silent, not Avada Kedavra, something Harry didn't have a name for, complex and dark, the kind of working that took years to construct, aimed with the absolute precision of someone who had been practicing this for a very long time. It crossed the hillside with the speed of something irresistible. It hit the Covenant field and dissolved. The same absorption. The same breath let out. Present and then not present. Voldemort stared. The Covenants are not a shield, Harry said, and his voice was steady and warm and completely without performance. "They're a statement of what the magical world actually is. What you're doing, what you've always done, is a violation of that fundamental nature. The magic doesn't need me to defend myself. The magic defends itself. Magic does not have preferences," Voldemort said. But his voice had changed, very slightly, barely perceptible, but Harry heard it. The first layer of certainty, thinning. "That's what you've always believed," Harry said. "That magic is neutral. A tool. Something that can be accumulated and wielded and owned. That's what the severance ritual was for, to make it that way permanently." He took a step forward, toward Voldemort, which made the red eyes narrow again. "But it's not. It was never neutral. It's the oldest living principle in this world, and it has always recognized the difference between what tends it and what desecrates it." Another step. "You know this. That's why you've been afraid of me since I was born. Not because of a prophecy. Because some part of you, the part that was Tom Riddle before you tried to remove that too, recognized what I am." Voldemort cast again. 3 rapid curses, different traditions, mixing approaches in the way of a brilliant combatant adapting to resistance. All 3 died in the Covenant field. He was breathing harder. Harry could see it, the slight change in the set of the shoulders, the compression of breath. "He's afraid," Luna said from behind Harry, conversationally, as if commenting on weather. "Genuinely. Not tactically. This is different from anything he's encountered because it doesn't respond to force. Everything he knows how to do is force." "I know," Harry said, not turning. "Then end it," Voldemort said, and his voice was back to the cold measured register, but it was an act now and they both knew it. "If you have the authority you claim. End it." Harry looked at him. Tom Riddle, who had been brilliant and damaged and had chosen very specifically what to do with both of those things. Who had spent 70 years making himself into something that couldn't be hurt by building a version of himself that couldn't feel anything. Who had fragmented his own soul 7 times in pursuit of the certainty that he would never lose, never end, never be subject to the thing that every other person in the world was subject to. "I'm not going to kill you today," Harry said. Voldemort was very still. "Not because I can't. Because what happens when you die matters as much as what happens when you live, and the how of it is part of the when. You have 6 Horcruxes." He felt the red eyes flinch, barely, and noted it with the calm of the 17 houses behind him, "and until they're gone, this isn't over, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise for the satisfaction of a confrontation that doesn't finish the job." He looked at him. "But I want you to understand something. The court is seated. The covenants are active. The severance is done, not just delayed, done, the architectural possibility of it is closed. Every move you make from here on is in a world that is actively working against you at a level you cannot match by force." He paused. "You can keep fighting. Or you can start reckoning with what you actually are." "Which is what?" Voldemort said quietly. "A man who was brilliant and afraid," Harry said, "and made catastrophically wrong choices about what to do with both." Silence on the hillside. The wind. The gray sky. The foundation stone behind Harry, whole and resonant, the note in the chord clear and steady. Voldemort looked at Harry for a long moment with the red eyes, and in them, very deep, very briefly, visible only because Harry was looking for it and the soul fragment connection was gone and there was nothing between them now, no magical echo, just 2 people on a hillside, was something that might have been grief. Or might have been the memory of grief from before he'd removed the capacity for it. Then he disapparated. Not dramatically. Just gone, the way things that can't be immediately resolved go, removed to be dealt with at a different time in a different way. The hillside was simply hillside again, the wind moving through the dead grass, the valley below spread in its November colors. Dumbledore let out a breath that Harry heard as the release of something he'd been holding for perhaps 30 years. Augusta Longbottom said, very quietly, "Good God." Neville said nothing. He was looking at the space where Voldemort had been and then at Harry, and his expression was the one that had been developing since September, not awe, exactly, or not only awe. The specific look of someone who has found the thing they were trying to stand next to all along. Ron had come up the hill without Harry noticing, must have arrived with Dumbledore, or shortly after, and was standing 10 feet away with his arms crossed and his jaw set and his eyes doing the thing where they were very bright and very steady simultaneously. Hermione was standing at Harry's left shoulder. She'd been there throughout. She put her hand on his arm once, briefly, the specific touch that meant you did it, and then let go and started taking notes, because that was who she was. Harry looked at the hillside. At the restored foundation stone. At the grey Welsh sky and the valley below and the October hills rolling south toward the horizon. He felt the 17 houses, all of them, complete, the chord full and resonant and clear. He felt the root house, the unnamed one, simply ground. He felt the king's chamber 200 miles away in the deep foundations of Hogwarts, the sword on the table at the northern seat, patient and waiting for the right moment. He thought, not today. But soon. They were back at Hogwarts by evening. The castle received them the way it had been receiving Harry since September 1st, with the specific warmth of a building that knows who belongs in it. The torches in the entrance hall were bright. The doors opened before they reached them. Fawkes was sitting on the banister at the top of the main staircase, which was not his usual perch, and he looked at Harry with the ancient bright eyes and made the sound, not a trill, not a song, something lower and more deliberate, an acknowledgement. A marking of a moment. Harry stopped on the staircase and looked at the phoenix for a moment. Then he went up. The common room that night was full in the way it hadn't been in weeks. Not just their group, the whole of Gryffindor Tower, everyone back from dinner, the fire going, the noise of 100 different conversations. Harry came through the portrait hole and the room went briefly still, the specific stillness of people who know something has happened and are waiting to understand what. He went to his usual chair by the fire and sat in it and looked at the room. Ron dropped onto the arm of the chair. Hermione took the chair across from him. Neville sat on the floor, which he'd done since first year when all the seats were taken and he'd never entirely stopped. Luna appeared from somewhere with 2 mugs and handed one to Harry and one to Ron without explanation. Ginny sat on the hearthrug and looked at Harry with the straight-talking Weasley eyes. "Tell me it went well," she said. "It went well," he said. "Tell me it's not over," she said, because Ginny Weasley had never been someone who needed to be protected from the complicated truth. "It's not over," he said. "The Horcruxes. The network. There's more work." He looked at the fire. "But the thing he's been working toward for decades is closed. The court is seated. The covenants are active. The magic that was diminishing," he paused. "It's not diminishing anymore." "How do you know?" she asked. He thought about how to explain it. He thought about the anchor going from damaged to whole, the crack closing with the quality of a breath let out. He thought about the court of the 17 houses, the root house beneath it all, simply ground. "I can feel it," he said. "The same way you feel when a room that's been cold for a long time starts to warm up." He looked at the fire. "It's warming up." Ginny looked at the fire too. The whole room was like that for a moment, 100 people individually quiet, the fire going, the cold November outside pressing against the old stone, the castle warm around them with its impossible ancient patience. Then Lee Jordan said something that made Fred and George dissolve into laughter and the noise came back, the room coming back to itself, and it was just Gryffindor Tower on a November evening, ordinary and irreplaceable. Late that night, after the common room had emptied and the fire had burned down to coals, Harry went to the king's chamber alone. The torches lit as he descended. The chamber was empty of its court, the standing positions unmarked now, the vault above in the amber light with its 17 seals. He walked to the northern axis and stood before the table. The sword. He looked at it for a long moment. He'd been not touching it since the first time he'd seen it, with the sense of something waiting for the right moment, and he'd been trusting that sense because it hadn't failed him yet. He thought about what Dumbledore had said, looking at the sword's inscription that first day. For what is right, not what is easy. He'd heard it from a different mouth years ago. A man who had loved him in his way and died for it. He felt the loss of Sirius with the specific quality it had now, not the fresh grief of June, not the sealed-over grief of the summer, but something that had found its proper shape, a grief that had been integrated into the structure of who he was rather than existing outside it. Sirius would have thought this was magnificent. He picked up the sword. It was lighter than it looked, which he hadn't expected, and warm in his hand in a way that metal shouldn't be warm, the warmth of the root house, of the unnamed principle, of ground. The runes along the blade caught the torchlight and the words ran through his mind, for what is right, not what is easy. He held it for a moment, and the 17 houses held it with him, and the chamber was quiet and complete around them. He didn't swing it. He didn't test it. He didn't make any declaration. He simply held it and felt what it was, not a weapon, exactly, though it was certainly that. More like a commitment. A formal acknowledgement, in the ancient language of the people who had built this chamber, that the person holding it understood what they were for. He set it back on the table. Not because he was done with it, because this was a beginning, and beginnings required restraint as well as arrival. The sword would be used when it needed to be used, in the right moment, in the right way, for the right reasons. He'd know when. He went back up the stairs, through the wall that wasn't a wall, into the corridor below the dungeons. He walked through the sleeping school, the torches low, the portraits sleeping, the suits of armor patient at their posts. He put his hand against the wall at the turning to the main staircase and felt the castle's magic, warm and immense, the oldest inhabited magical space in Britain, the anchor he'd reinforced in the west tower ringing clean and clear, the deep chamber below resonant with the court's recent invocation. "Good night," he said, to the stone. To the castle. To the 17 things in his chest that had been waiting for him his whole life. He went to bed and slept without dreams, and in the morning the sun came through the windows of the Gryffindor dormitory with the particular clarity of November light after a night of hard frost, everything stripped down, everything visible, the world made legible by the removal of everything that wasn't essential. Harry opened his eyes. He had work to do. He got up. 2 days later, the Quibbler ran Xenophilius Lovegood's piece on the front page, 3,000 words in the font he saved for his most important pieces, with a hand-drawn illustration of the king's chamber and the headline, "The Age of the King, What the Ancient Court Means for Every Witch and Wizard in Britain." It sold out in 4 hours. The ministry issued a formal response that was so carefully worded it managed to say nothing at all, which Amelia Bones told Harry overflow was the closest Fudge had ever come to conceding a point. Draco Malfoy passed Harry in the corridor on Thursday morning and said nothing, which was different from his previous versions of saying nothing. His previous silence had been performance, the studied cold of someone maintaining a persona. This silence had a different quality. The quality of someone who is waiting to see what happens next in a story they've decided to stay in rather than exit. Harry didn't stop walking. But he nodded. Malfoy's chin dipped once in return, barely perceptible, and they went their separate ways. Neville spent every evening in the greenhouses and had begun making sketches for a new design, something that would accommodate the extinct species from the Peverell vault and several additional ones he was fairly certain could be coaxed back from the border of non-existence with the right conditions. He showed the sketches to Harry on Friday and Harry looked at them and said, "Yes. All of it. Draw up what you need and I'll arrange the funding." Neville looked at him over the sketches. "You don't have to, I know," Harry said. "I want to." Luna had been receiving owls from her father every morning with updates on the Quibbler's expanded readership and her Silver Compass readings, which she shared selectively with Harry in the form of notes written in her curling hand on pale blue paper. The notes were always cryptic and always accurate, and Harry had started filing them in a dedicated section of his organizational system, which Hermione had noted was the highest compliment his organizational system could pay anything. Hermione herself had begun cataloging the Peverell Vault books with a system of her own, cross-referenced with the information from Dumbledore's Horcrux journal and Harry's growing understanding of the ancient house traditions. She worked with the specific joy of someone doing the thing they were made to do at the scale they were made to do it, and it made her, Harry thought, more herself than she'd been in years. Ron was Ron, which was not a small thing. He was at breakfast and dinner and Quidditch practice and late-night common room sessions and in the dormitory before sleep, steady as the ground, watching everything with his bright and practical eyes and being the person who said yes when Harry needed someone to confirm that something was real and wait when Harry needed someone to pull him back a half-step. Harry had always known Ron was his best friend. He understood now, with the clarity that 17 houses gave to a great many things, exactly how rare and exact and irreplaceable that was. On the 1st of December, Harry received a letter from Amelia Bones marked urgent, sealed with her personal seal rather than the ministry's. He read it at breakfast. The Auror operations had been running for 3 weeks. The intelligence Malfoy had provided, cross-referenced with Avery's contribution and the movement data from the Welsh site, had resulted in 14 arrests and the disruption of 3 significant Death Eater network nodes. The ministry was struggling to process the scale of the enforcement action. Fudge had made 4 public statements, each one moving incrementally from no comment to something that was cautiously and reluctantly approaching this seems to have been warranted. But that wasn't what was marked urgent. Bones had located the locket. Harry refolded the letter, put it in his robe, and looked at Hermione across the table. She read his expression the way she always had, completely, immediately. "Today?" she asked. "Soon," he said. "How soon?" He thought about the Horcrux journal. The sword in the king's chamber. The court seated and the covenants active and the magical world warming up from its long diminishment with the specific slow quality of something that is healing rather than recovering. He thought about the 6 remaining fragments of Tom Riddle's fractured soul, each one a knot in the working of the world, each one requiring the specific attention and the specific authority and the specific knowledge that he now had. He thought about what he told Voldemort on the Welsh hillside, "I'm not going to kill you today." The how of it is part of the when. The when was getting closer. "Give me 2 weeks, he told Hermione. She opened her notebook. 2 weeks, she said, writing it down. "I'll have the preparation complete in 1. "Of course you will," he said. She looked up from the notebook with the small private smile she had for moments when things were going the right way. Harry had always liked that smile. It was the smile of someone who had decided to be here, specifically here, in this particular chapter of this particular story, and had no regrets about the decision. He poured himself more pumpkin juice. Down the table, Luna was reading the Quibbler and making approving sounds at her father's latest editorial. Neville was sketching in the margin of his herbology notes, plant designs, the new greenhouse taking shape in miniature on the corner of a page about Devil's Snare. Ron was eating with the complete commitment of someone who considers eating a serious occupation and gives it the respect it deserves. At the Slytherin table, Draco Malfoy was eating too, which was new, which was good. At the staff table, Dumbledore was looking down the length of the Great Hall with the expression Harry was coming to know as his most honest one, not the public wisdom, not the managed benevolence, just an old man watching a room full of people and feeling what it meant. Their eyes met. Dumbledore inclined his head slightly, the specific nod of equals. Harry returned it. The enchanted ceiling above was doing something extraordinary in the winter morning light, not the dramatic sky of a storm or the fiery display of a sunset, just an ordinary December morning, low cloud, the first suggestion of snow in the heavy gray, the school day beginning in the school's ordinary way. Harry looked up at it and felt the spell work in it, the layers of ancient intention, the promise spoken in the language magic uses when it's speaking directly. This is real. This world is real. You belong here. He thought, yes. I do. And below, in the deep foundations, the king's chamber held the quiet warmth of the court's invocation. And the sword rested on the table at the northern axis. And the 17 houses rang in the chest of a 17-year-old boy eating breakfast in the great hall on an ordinary December morning. Waiting for nothing. Ready for everything.